I'm going to get it started.
Okay.
So it's 2019. It's hard to believe it's almost 2020. It is almost 2020. So we're trying to record some information, some good family stories and some family history. I thought it would be kind of fun to start a little bit with describing the Glenn side of the family and the Chapman side of the family, just from an aggregate standpoint of, you know, when they came into the country and how many of them there were, and you know, how the family got kind of started here on each side, and then how they met, and then of course a little bit more probably about a little bit of your upbringing in Tamaroa and whatnot, and anything else you want to go to. But I thought it would be fun to get a little bit of that history. Now, we just found out some of it's in the book here. There's a great book, but in a general sense, it might be an interesting way to start. And then you can, you know, take it for whatever you want. But
It's a history of the Unicorn and Chapman.
Oh.
And then it goes
You gonna be able to pick up sound?
I hope so.
So you're recording it?
Yeah.
now? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're
So
going.
Betty wanted to introduce herself first.
Yes, I am Betty, and I wanted to be here with my elder sister, Elder Donna, because when I was younger, they threatened to lock me in the attic where there were mice that I was definitely afraid of, and the dark. And if I didn't call Donna, Elder Donna, and my cousin Barbara, Elder Barbara, that's what they threatened me.
But it was all Barbara's idea.
But, oh yeah, sure. Sure, and I survived.
I didn't know Barbara was in on that
Oh, she
scam.
was.
Well, she was the instigator.
Well,
Okay,
it's
so
one-
Barbara was your cousin from who?
Our father's sister's daughter,
Oh, okay.
Thelma.
and Thelma.
Oh,
Aunt Thelma's
And
daughter.
Thelma Uncle Hubert.
And Thelma don't keep it.
We would go to visit them, and her bedrooms opened into the attic.
Oh.
Because I'd always want to be hanging around, being part of the older kids. So that's how they threatened me. So I ran away.
I thought she was
You're
going to
hearing
introduce
sound
herself
before
as
we
the
keep
middle
going.
child.
It'll work.
Which I am,
Because she makes a big deal out of that, because our youngest sister almost died when she was, Judith almost died when she was a baby. So she was always our father's favorite, and she could do anything, and my father would excuse her because she almost died when she was a baby.
And Donna was the oldest, so she was the smartest, so then that left me.
So you can blame
So
for
you can just
everything.
see.
So she's trained up this poor thing, this poor me, her whole life.
But how did she almost die?
She
Oh,
was,
she
she was premature, as Betty was premature, 7-month baby,
Yeah.
and Judith was
Really?
a 7-month baby.
4
Oh.
pounds.
But
No
Judith
kidding.
was really tiny and had underdeveloped lungs, I think. And she got very, very sick. They brought her home, and I can remember her being in a basket on the dining room table. And every time she breathed, her little feet, her legs and feet would come out, and so she got very, very sick.
Oh, wow.
And they took her to the doctor that was more local, and he said, well, there's nothing we can do for her. It said, you know, they have this new sulfa drug come out, but she's too young to have it. And so they took her back home, and my father said, if we don't do something for her, she's gonna die. So they got in the car, and they went to Tamaroa, and Dr. Stevens was there, and he looked at her, and they said, well, she is gonna die if we don't give her sulfa, so we're just gonna try it and give her sulfa anyway.
No
And-
kidding.
And
Yeah,
that,
she's too young.
and that cured her. And so it was very scary, so no wonder she was a favorite.
So we had to listen to it the rest of our lives.
7 pounders, so that's.
Is that the same soap?
No,
4
seven.
pounds.
4 pounds.
7 months, and she,
7 months,
Seven.
I was 7 months and 4 pounds.
and she
So
was,
what did this alpha drug do to her? Did it make her breathe easier or be able to get breath?
It's basically an antibiotic.
it was an antibiotic. And
The same one that the
It was a miracle drug, that was a miracle drug.
Sulfa
It was
drugs
the
were the
first time
first
in her
miracle drugs before penicillin.
Well, there's allergies.
They told me that I'm an allergic to it, and I don't know where that story comes from, but.
Because Donnie is, and now we all
I almost died twice.
All right, one at a time, otherwise we can't hear it.
What?
So the reason we know that I'm allergic to sulfa is because I almost died twice. Once I was very sick, and the doctor gave me cold medicine that had sulfa in it. And I collapsed at home, and the doctor came running. They called the doctor, he came running, and I woke up and he was giving me an adrenaline shot. So I have very serious allergy to sulfur. So the second time it happened, I was driving to high school, and I had a cold, and I stopped by the drugstore, and our drugstore was owned by Enoch Marlowe, who had been thrown out of medical school for doing an abortion. And so he became a pharmacist instead, and he ran this drugstore. But if you knew him well enough, he would give you
He'd give you
He
medicine.
would give you medicine. And he gave me some medicine to take, and by the time I was almost to high school, I could feel my throat starting to swell, and my tongue getting real itchy and everything. And I turned right around and went back and walked in and said, "Was there any sulfur?" And I fainted right there. And I woke up back in the back of the drugstore, and he was giving me adrenaline again. So from then on, no.
That's why you tell us we might be allergic to sulfa and
Yeah,
Yeah, well, Chuck had it once.
and he
Chuck
had a
did,
very severe
and
allergy.
remember, yes,
Oh,
his
you did?
eyes all swollen.
Then
I don't know if you remember that, Chuck, but.
Well, I don't remember the event.
You remember hearing about it,
You
right?
told me about the event, so I.
because I always tell when they put this wrist on me because I'm like, all right, my mom tells me I might be allergic to sulfa, so I'm
Yeah,
supposed to
that's
tell you all
right,
that,
too.
and
Yeah, I
that's
think we all say that.
Yeah. I mean,
because we don't really know. Do they use that drug anymore?
Oh,
yeah.
They do
I
still?
had some
Sulfa
a couple of
still?
years ago and started having a reaction, had to go to the doctor, but it wasn't severe, but I could feel the reaction.
But I thought Dad was allergic also to
And he's
sulfur.
allergic, yes, I think he's allergic to sulfur.
So yeah, I mean, you got,
Somehow.
I mean, that's 1 + 1, so it's like not good.
So anyway, to go back on the family history, as much as I know, and I think Chuck has some research that the son of one of my cousins did on the Chapman family and traced them all the way back to England in, I think, the 1850s. And there were 3 brothers that came to the United States. I think they went to Wisconsin first, but they ended up in southern Illinois, and they each bought a 40-acre parcel. You know, they had a 40-acre farm. And one of them moved out to Colorado and sold his to one of the other brothers. So one of those brothers was a great-grandfather. And my grandfather, Frank Chapman, had the farm outside of Tamaroa.
So what year?
And this was when my mother was a child, and it been
1920, I think they said that they moved there.
Yeah, and
Need to move from the town.
Or moved from the
no,
town.
moved from the
From farm
town.
to
No,
the
it was
town.
before that, because all of the children were born there. And that was, my mother's born in 1908, so they had it
Oh,
you
okay.
know, much earlier than that. And my grandmother's name was Neerkorn, and her family was German immigrants. And she didn't have an accent, but her sisters did. She had 2 sisters. And my Aunt Elsie used to always make fun of their accent, you know. But we had a lot of immigrants in our family. we were a bunch of immigrants. And my grandfather lived on that farm, and my grandmother, and raised their 7 children there.
And he was a teacher, and then he
He
became
was
a
a minister
minister.
and a teacher, and a farmer, you know, just under a little of this, a little of that, like all of us. And then my grandfather died of a stroke when he was, or a heart attack, one or the other, when he was in his 50s. But just before that, they had sold the farm and moved into town, and bought the house up there in Tamaroa. That I think you
remember that house.
Remember that, Grandma?
His obituary is in that book of Grandma's mementos and that.
It is,
Right,
yes.
right.
Tell us about it.
And so my grandmother lived there. She had a wash house in the back, and she had a chicken house back there, and she had a place where they would hang hams to cure, you know, a smokehouse, a smokehouse. You know. And I remember when she liked cooking over a wood burning stove, so even when she got a new stove, there's a wood burning stove, and I can remember that she'd go out and get chickens out of the chicken yard and wring their necks, and then they'd plunge them into boiling water, and then you'd have to pick all the feathers off, you know, and make fried chicken.
I got to do that myself.
That's where
Our
mother,
made that too.
that's where mother learned to do that.
Right.
Because my mother occasionally would do that.
So the Glenn family,
So they then were in Tamaroa
yes.
Yes.
Okay, right.
from that point
That's
on.
where
And
my-
grandma
that's-
grew up in Tamaroa?
That's what your grandmother, my mother,
Right.
was there, right. And she went to high school in Tamaroa for 3 years, and then she graduated from DuQuoin High School. And we have her yearbook, it's here, if you would like to read it.
Yeah.
And then she went, she was the only one of the girls that went to college.
Oh.
And she went to Carbondale, which was
Yes,
then
I
called
knew.
the Carbondale Normal School, because that was the kind of college you went to if you were gonna be a teacher. And that's where she met my father. If you want to, rather than go through it all, if you want to read about my father and his mother, I have a story on coolfamily.com called Sex, Lies, and and a Great Shakeup in the Family Tree, or something like that. And it's like a novel, it's about my grandmother's life, and it would have made a good movie about her life. And so our parents, my parents met in college in Carbondale, each studying to be teachers. And mother had to stop and teach at a one-room schoolhouse for a year or two to get enough money to go back and finish.
Hmm.
And they got married before they graduated. It took them a while, but then they graduated.
Oh, they got married before they graduated?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure about that, but I was just
I
reading
remember
this.
that, yeah.
I was just reading one of these books, and I noticed in the graduation.
In like 32 or was
Yeah,
it?
they graduated in 32, and they were married in 27. But in 32,
Well, that's
there's in this book, there's a graduation announcement program, and it has both their names, and her name is Glenn there, so she was Glenn when she married.
Well, that's new data.
So.
Now, how did the Glenn's side get, where did they come from and grow up and whatnot?
That's been harder to trace, because my dad would only talk about his life in Dalvin, and Dalvin is a little town in southern Illinois,
Not too far from Melbourne.
not too far off, but he grew up there, and his dad and his dad's brother, I think, owned a general store in town, and so that made him kind of important, because that was probably the biggest store in town. And one of the stories he liked to tell was there was a famous boxing match, which I can't remember who it was, but you probably heard it if you.
Dempsey?
It could have been Dempsey, at any rate.
Where he had the hand radio? Yeah.
He had built himself a crystal radio, and nobody else knew anything about radio in that little town. And of course, at the general store, there were all these old guys that sat around the pot-bellied stove and told
Right.
stories and this sort of thing, But he had built himself this crystal radio, and he was at home, and he listened to the fight on the radio. And he went down to the store and told them who won the fight, and they just laughed him out of there, because the papers weren't even out yet. How can anybody know who won the fight? That sort of thing.
Knowing Grandpa, he didn't use that advantage to make a bet and make it longer to him. I kind of went about his life, up his alley.
So he had two sisters, right? And that's it. Yeah.
He had two sisters. He was the oldest. Well, actually, there was an older brother, because my grandfather had been married before, and his wife died.
Oh, really?
So my grandmother was the second wife,
I didn't even know
and
that.
there was a son from that, which grandmother really loved, but he had gone away to school to a boarding school in Missouri someplace, and he got pneumonia and died.
Oh, no kidding.
It was a big tragedy to him. So my father was really the oldest of that marriage, and then there was Aunt Donna, his sister, and then Aunt Mildred.
Right.
And my grandmother was pretty flighty. She actually we know now from looking back, I realized that she was bipolar.
Oh, well, that's where we all get it.
And that's why you're all goofed up.
It all makes sense now.
My father would always get it, and he'd say, oh, first she's up, and then she's down. First she's up, and then she's down. Well, we didn't know what that was then, but now we know. She must have been bipolar.
She was Helen.
And she
She
was,
was, she was.
definitely she was bipolar, no doubt about it. And she had some,
But
so,
then the other story is when our father left town, remember that, on the train?
oh, yes, right, he ran
He
away.
ran away on the train with another
With
friend
another
or
kid
something.
they were in high school.
From Dahlgren?
Yeah, from
Yeah,
Dahlgren.
and they got on the train
decided,
and left home.
they decided they'd just hop a freight train and see what it was like to just ride the waves,
Yes.
you know?
And he ended up in Texas,
And
So
didn't
then they
he?
took off and
He
they,
ended up in Texas,
Yeah,
and his
How old was
friend,
he?
but his friend left earlier and
Yeah.
Dad kept going.
he kept going.
And I think he ended up in Texas. And then he finally thought, well, I've had enough, and so then
He called home, and his
Oh.
dad sent him money to come back.
Didn't he, I remember him telling the story, and he was on the street and begging somebody to give him a dime to call home or something. He didn't have any
Oh,
money.
really? I don't remember
And
that.
I remember him telling the story that he didn't have any money to call home, and so he had to beg people on the street to give him money so he could call home and say, Dad, come get
Now,
me.
how old was he then?
He was
High
a
school.
teenager. He was a teenager.
He was a
So
silly
this
teenager.
is sort of a secret about
Yes.
his parenting. Because he
Oh,
got on
yes.
the train and he came back and his dad met him at the station. And they got in the car and they drove home and he was just waiting for his dad to say something. His father never said a word about it, never said anything about what had done his parenting. Never mentioned it again.
Yeah.
And of course, that made it worse. And so, yes.
Or maybe not, you know.
maybe not, yeah.
But he loved to tell that story about,
And so then things that happened to us, he never said anything.
Yeah, and he never
Never said
he
anything.
took the same way when he was raising us.
No, he never said anything back.
Never
So
said
Judy wrecked the car, he didn't say anything.
He did.
When my car ran out of oil twice, he didn't say anything.
Mom ran into that cow.
Why did you
So if somebody was wanting some parenting advice,
Yes, that was
there's
me.
Grandpa's parenting advice. They've done something really stupid and they know it, you don't need to beat it into them.
Because they know how dumb they were.
So tell a little bit about the drive-ins and him building that, and then what it was like when you were growing up in those years around then, because then you would have been,
It actually started though with movie theaters first.
We lived in
Right.
Oakdale, Illinois, which is a little town that's about, I don't know, about 30 miles from Tamara, maybe 25, something like that. And he was the principal of the high school and grade school, which were combined. It's only had 250 people in the town. And to make some extra money, he got a movie projector, and he would show movies once a week in the
On the wall on the outside of the
auditorium
school.
of the school. And I can remember going in, I remember Nyoka of the Jungle. They had these cereals, and you know, and it would always, she'd be dangling by a vine over a cliff or something, you know, and then you'd have to come back next week to see how she was. Or if she was being attacked by a lion, you know, and so you'd have to come back next week.
I never saw those.
So you were too little.
I know.
Again, middle child.
So then,
I'm playing paper dolls or something.
So then he started showing movies in little towns around southern Illinois, and he had this big trailer that he would haul behind his car, and had all the folding chairs in it, and tent sidewalls. And he'd go into these little towns on a particular night, and he'd hire some kid to help him. They'd put up the tent walls around, and they'd set up all the chairs, and then they would sell tickets, and they'd show the movie. After the movie was over, they would fold up all the chairs, fold up the tent, put it back in the trailer, and he would drive home, and he would sleep, and then he'd get up and teach the next morning, and then the next night, the same thing
Different
over
town,
again.
yeah.
And then he went from that, he'd find a building. that
This
he
was
could
in the
use.
30s? Or
40s.
40s? 40s, because when you were a little girl, you remember this?
I remember this.
All right, so
yes.
it had to be in the 40s then,
Yeah.
early
It was in
But
40s.
he would go to these little towns, he told me, and he would get all the merchants to agree to stay open a little bit later that night. And then he
So-
would show the free movie and then charge a nickel for popcorn, which was, half-cent profit or whatever.
Yeah, but then,
Yeah.
but
Then
then he
later.
started renting some buildings.
Buildings.
Right.
And then he started having regular theater where you paid like 10 cents to get in or something like that. And the popcorn, of course, is the most profitable thing in any theater, is that you pop popcorn and that's where you really make your money. But that would be one night in a town and then it would be another night in a different town and so on. And then he.
So we had buildings in different towns?
Yeah.
He would
but
We just
mostly-
rent
mostly
them,
they
you just
were
rent them for the
rented.
night.
And
Rent
then-
them.
Or
And
for the-
then one time he decided, in Grand Tower, Illinois, he decided he would build a theater. And so he was always very street smart, so he went and he hired somebody to start digging the foundation and he was getting, the walls up and that sort of thing, and he didn't have enough money to finish it. But he started it. And then the banker came down the street and he says, oh, this looks like this is a nice project. If you need any money to finish, well, just let me know. So of course, then he went and borrowed the money to finish the building.
Wow.
And
What town was that in?
Grand Tower.
Grand Tower.
It's over on the Mississippi River. I haven't been back there.
On the
That
Mississippi
building's
River.
still-
Yeah, down the very tip of,
Just to add to that story, what he told me is that he figured out when the banker went to walk to work every day. And he walked in front of his place, and so he would get there just beforehand and start acting like he was just working as hard as possible. But he was just moving bricks around because he didn't have any money for any more bricks. But this guy was so impressed with the quality of this and how hard he worked, that then he came back and said, yeah, if you ever need anything, just let me know.
That is a good
But that's
story.
how he would work it.
Yeah,
That was kind of his way.
So then, from that,
Then he went east and.
then we had to move to Tamaro because it was during World War II, and he got a draft notice, and he went and got his physical, and he thought he was going to be drafted, and so there was, none of Mother's family was in Oakdale, so he bought a house in Tamaro and moved us all over there, so we'd be near her family while he was away at the war, and then they changed the law, and he was 36 with 3 children, and he wasn't eligible for the draft anymore, so he didn't have to go.
Just barely.
But didn't they change that law within a couple of days of when he was leaving?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
really,
really
but
short.
it was after he'd already had his physical and ready to go. But then I think he must have felt guilty, because then he started going down to the munitions plant in Crab Orchard and working at night after he was finished with it. And he did that for a while until I think he just got too exhausted and couldn't do it anymore. So that's how we ended up in Tamaro.
That is interesting.
So after the war, at some point he had to go to Washington DC for something, I don't remember what for, he drove. And it's way back, he was driving through Ohio and he saw a drive-in theater called the Melody Drive-In Theater. He'd never seen that before and he was just fascinated. He came back all excited, said he was going to go in the drive-in theater business, this was the new thing. And he liked that name Melody, so he's just going to use that name too.
That's right.
So,
And Grandma said, oh, no, no.
And Grandma said,
yeah, and my mother, who was nervous, because he was always
No,
just
not
starting
again,
these
we're just-
things, and then she
Runs the family.
And she was just a nervous wreck, and so they built this drive-in, and of course, they didn't know what they were doing, but he, and a local carpenter, built this tower, which they overbuilt. It was, they could have done it for less, but they overbuilt it because they didn't know if it's going to stay up. So they built this theater, and they built a concession stand and they had the projection booth in it and everything. And Mother was nearly a wreck because she thought, I'm nearly 40 years old and I'm not successful yet, and I
And we'd
just
have to
don't.
start over if this doesn't
And we'll
work.
just have to start over again, and maybe nobody will come to this, and we've lost everything, and we're gonna own the bank money and this sort of thing.
And you're 3 or 4 years old.
Oh, no, I'm
Oh, no,
not.
she's
No,
old.
Oh, no,
I
no.
was a teenager at that time.
Oh, that's right,
That's like
okay,
And
nine.
okay.
this was in 1948.
All right, so not
And
1940,
so
okay.
they had designed it so there was land in front of it, and there was sort of a loop for cars to wait, you know, and this sort of thing. And so we all get dressed up when we were ready to go out the first night, and we get there, and there are cars in all those loops and on the highway, and the state police
And the state
are
police were everywhere
directing
directing
traffic, because it stopped
They
all
opened-
traffic
No,
on the
they
highway.
opened up this thing, you know.
So it was an instant success.
Wow.
It was such a relief to my mother.
What was the first movie?
Yeah, and then she, I don't know.
I don't remember.
So is that when he stopped, like, wasn't teaching anymore, wasn't being a principal at that
No,
point?
they gave that up when he
Right.
started doing
When he was doing
the
the
7
theaters.
nights a
The
week.
7 nights
For
a
the
week.
theaters, yeah.
Okay.
First in a long line of spouses that have said, you're gonna do what?
Not another business.
You don't feel so
So then he
bad.
did that.
And then,
One in here.
later he built one in Mount Vernon, and then he heard that somebody else was gonna build a second one in Mount Vernon, so he quickly built.
So he built another one.
You built another one in Mount
Two
Vernon?
in Mount Vernon, one in Heron.
And then he went into
and
partnership
bought-
with the one
Yeah,
in
bought,
Heron,
yeah, bought one in Heron.
and, which never did real well, but the others did all right.
But then I remember
Well, how many?
you or he telling us that he had this scheme
On the
with the
movie.
giant
Yeah.
movie,
Do
the
you
movie
remember that?
companies, right? And so he would wait, and so a big new movie would come out and he'd wait and not order it. And then the movie execs would look on a map and go, why do we have this movie going in Southern Illinois? Because he had this monopoly of all these theaters, and he'd wait, and then he'd cut a deal with them for getting those movies at a discount.
But it was still first showing in all
But it
of
was
Southern
still first
Illinois,
showing.
so he didn't, nobody knew any different, but he did
So
a
he'd
movie
wait
for a
until they were
fraction.
real desperate, and then he'd get a real good deal, and then he'd make even more money.
And he'd cut certain theaters, certain movie
Yeah.
houses out periodically.
Yeah.
He'd just stop taking their stuff and they'd start
Yeah.
freaking out that
And
they
they'd
were.
start freaking out, and then he'd cut some.
And then he started bringing in
Wow.
some live entertainment and intermission sometimes. And one time he had Hank Williams come.
Oh,
And
really?
then the stage was on top of the concession stand.
of course.
Yeah, and so, and Judy was on the lap of Hank Williams.
So, yeah, we have quite a few of Nashville
Yeah.
country stars that came
Ah.
out
Yeah,
there
and
for a
they
little
would,
while.
they would entertain it.
Didn't do that for too long.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing to
That's
do
fun.
then. I mean,
Because unheard of, there was no place else other than
I mean,
Wayne
how
State
fun
Fair.
to be able to go out to.
Oh, that was big.
Entertainment.
Theaters were there for that?
You never,
So how many
How
theaters
many
total?
drive-ins, or drive-ins, or,
Three of his
What
own
kind?
and one half of another one. I think.
Three and then half, for a little while, half of that one in here, which didn't do too well.
And so the first one opened in 48. And when did he sell the
In-
drive-in theaters?
It was when I was in college, I think,
Fifteen,
and they were doing well. But we were asking him, well, why are you thinking about selling it? And I will never forget, he drew this chart. And he says, the way most businesses go, he says, they go up like this and then they go down. I think we're about here. And he says, I'm gonna sell it while I can and get the money, because I think there are too many drive-ins and this is gonna go out of style, you know? And he was
and he
right.
did.
Was it after 1960 when you moved to Flossmoor? Or 1960?
No, you said you were in
I
college.
think I was in college.
No, no, I don't think so, because I remember going to some of the, he took me to some of the drive-ins down there.
Really?
Yeah, to
Well,
go,
maybe
when
so
they were
much
being,
later.
when they were being repaired and everything like that.
Yeah.
Well,
My
you wouldn't have
understanding
really-
was that he sold in the sixties, you know, he bought it, he started in the late forties, it's called the fifties, so he ran it through all the fifties. And then in the early sixties,
That's probably.
when they started to
Probably,
peter
right.
out, because we had 57, you know, the sock hop era and all that, and then
Yeah, 'cause I
up into the
graduated from college, they were
sixties,
still
that's when
there.
he sold.
and then the
And
TVs.
then by the seventies, there were no more drive-ins.
Yeah.
yeah, what about that exhaust fan that he built personally?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So he also, I don't know that he ever, do you know if he ever got a patent for this? Anyway, so back when he started showing films, these were the acetate films that were very deadly. if they caught on fire. And
Yeah.
so, and they killed, that's why projectionist was actually a hazardous occupation, because if the film got stuck and started on fire, then the smoke off of that would kill you almost immediately.
Nitrate.
And so, yeah, the nitrate. So he invented this system that he put on the movie projectors and his instructions to the guys were, look, if this happens and you see it happen, all you do is you flip this switch as you're running out the door. And that switch activated a fan that, you know about this? And that activated a fan that sucked out all the bad fumes so they wouldn't die.
Wow.
And that was a big deal.
I didn't hear that story, so
Yeah.
I must have told you about it.
And I mean, we'd always have to drive out and check to make sure the film was there, so we'd be there for the showing that night. And so
It's
that's,
delivered by truck.
right, and
Say
then
it
you'd have
was.
to go out and check and make sure it was all there for that night.
Multiple,
And so that's
yeah,
how we got
multiple
to learn
reels,
to drive,
because
because we get him to take us and let us drive out to check the film.
Yeah.
So that was our driving lesson.
so that was the thing, when in movies back then, they came in these movie reels, but a whole movie
Right.
didn't fit on one reel. So back, if
Yeah,
you
that's
were my
it.
age, you could tell there was a little dot that would show up in the lower right-hand
Right.
corner
Mhm.
that told the projectionist to start the other projector at
Right.
that moment,
And switch.
so that they would overlap and you would see a relatively seamless transition from that to that, with Henry Bogart still talking through the same line and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
But I don't know if it was ever patented. That would be good to
I don't think
research.
we
I'm
did.
sure he did.
I don't.
So they
I've never heard
moved-
that.
after he sold the drive-in theaters, he moved to the trailer park for a while, right?
They got a job, my dad got I guess they both got teaching jobs up in Normal, Illinois.
Normal.
Normal, Illinois. And
Did
they,
Mom teach there? I remember.
she thought they were, no, well, for a while she taught in Tamaroa and then,
Where did she
and
teach
then
Latin? She's in,
and I don't know, but then she was
She
teaching
taught Latin.
English and Latin, and then, so they lived in, they had a mobile home that they lived in Normal, just, they still had their house,
They would
but
come
during
back
the
to
school
Tamaroa.
year. they'd
Oh, I
go up
see.
there and teach. And then.
Is that the mobile home that was then used up in Wisconsin that they built
No,
around?
no.
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 Okay.
And, because I think I don't know.
Well, they had one in Thornton for a few years when they first came up to the Chicago area.
Yes, and so then.
I remember the
they decided
three-legged
that
dog.
They taught it, yeah.
They
taught it.
realized that in spite of the fact that my mother was so angry with me because I was so dumb to have all these children, they finally realized these are the only grandchildren she's gonna have. So then they had to move closer. And so they got a job up there, and she got a job in Thornton teaching English, and he got a job in Cicero. And
Yeah,
at the
she was actually at Thorn Ridge High School.
Yeah, Thorn Ridge, right.
Did he teach or was he?
Well,
counselor?
his job there was.
Special education or something, or special needs kids?
Special
Administrator.
education, his job was to find part-time jobs for the special needs students. And so that meant he had to go to the Rotary Club and stuff like that around in the town and hobnob with the business owners and then talk them into hiring these students who, were special needs students who, weren't going to get jobs otherwise. And that was really what, he taught some too, but that was his
Mainly
main
his
job, was to help the.
So they sold the Tamaroa house and
Then moved up different.
and then moved up to the mobile home in Thornton or
They
over,
didn't sell the house until they
Until-
decided to build the.
Until they got.
until they build the South Howland house?
South Holland.
Oh, they built that house?
Yeah, he built the house.
Once they got the new house. So-
And then he sold
So
Tamaroa.
one thing that I forgot to say, which was, my father loved to tell about, was when he lived in Dalvin. And he had one grandfather who had fought in the Civil War on the Union side, and one that had fought on the Confederate side. And so it was a big deal then for Decoration Day, which was, to honor all the soldiers. I mean, we call it Veterans Day now, but it was called Decoration Day when people go out to the cemeteries and whatever. and they'd always have a parade in this little town. And both the grandfathers would be there until they started playing Marching Through Georgia. And then his Confederate grandfather would get angry and leave town, get back on his horse and buggy and go back home because he didn't like them playing Marching Through Georgia.
That's a good story.
I didn't know that.
So what else would you like to know? I mean, there's lots to tell.
You could tell stories on them. Somebody they could think of some things,
Wait, Betty, what about you? So where did you leave, when you left Tim Rowe, where did you go?
Well, first thing, I went to school at the University of Illinois for 2 years, and was a Chi Omega. And then I decided to.
I thought you went to Carbondale.
I did, then I went back to Carbondale.
Oh, so you did 2 years at,
2 years at the University of Illinois and 2 years at Carbondale.
I see.
I
And
think it's
then,
because you had a boyfriend there.
yes.
Might have something.
Might have something to do with it, yeah. And so then, I finished up I had someone from Cahokia come and observe my teaching, my student teaching. So I finished my classes, and then they had a teacher that they fired. So she called me and said, "Will I start?" So I finished on Friday and started working on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I taught there for a while, and then.
In Cahokia, that's a town?
Mm-hmm.
Cahokia Mountains.
Belleville, East St. Louis.
Cool place.
It's a cool place to go for.
Yeah, I think I've been there once.
The whole racetrack, they have a
Mhm.
racetrack there.
Yeah, what's that, that was an
Yeah,
Indian
go get
tribe.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on,
It was
yeah.
an old Indian tribe, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a city,
Anyway, I taught there until '66, and then I went with some friends to California.
In 66.
Oh, okay.
how did why, you just decided to move to California, just while
it?
there?
It was the
Just went with friends,
60s.
yeah.
And friends who were moving, so.
And we knew friends there, so we just moved. I mean, I just figured, well, why not, so. I did.
Shake
So
it
did you
up.
teach there?
Yes, I taught, actually there, I taught 3rd grade there, and then when I went there, it was kind of late and I couldn't really be too picky, so I taught the handicapped, the hyperactive kids in a junior high school. Those that hit the door, you knew if they'd taken their Ritalin or not.
I don't think they even had Ritalin.
Yeah, they did. Oh, yeah, trust me.
Really?
Yeah, they did.
Fresh got some in your desk, right? You give them to
I mean, didn't you have them, that would, you knocked you up against the wall and?
Well, no, not really, not against the wall, but one who eventually ended up in a mental institution. I was writing some stuff on the, on the board that they were gonna have to do. This one says, "Get off it, gal, I'm not doing all that," They're just funny kids.
So then how did you meet Ron?
Well, I taught with a girl who went to college and was married to a guy that was a friend of Ron. And Ron had just gotten back from the Vietnam War. And so we were a blind date. Which 48 years later we worked out.
Yeah. That was 1970?
71.
71?
Yep, 1971. So we got married in Newport Beach, California. And Donna was my bridesmaid.
Yeah, I got some good pictures on
And
that.
there's one, there's a picture right
I
there of the
didn't
wedding.
see
and
Aunt
stuff.
Judy in that photograph.
She wasn't there.
She wasn't.
She didn't come because she was having exams, I think, for her master's degree at that time, and so she couldn't
And where
work out
was
the
she
timing. To the
doing?
University of Illinois.
Okay.
I think the University of Illinois, right? Yeah.
Well, she got her
But
master's
she-
degree.
Her master's degree, she graduated from Southern, but she got her master's degree. And the timing was right before that, so she couldn't make it out. So. But Aunt Elsie and Aunt Thelma came.
Aunt Elsie and Aunt Thelma came. So,
Well, it was a long way to go.
Aunt Judy married Uncle Larry in the 60s? Sometime in the 60s?
No, when was it?
Because they were there in that like 1966.
70s.
Well, but they were there in the something like 66, 67 or something like one of the movies that were. Uncle Larry was there.
19, she was born in 43, and she was at college when they got married, so.
So
that
say
would be
20 years old would be 63,
63,
64.
along in there.
Yeah, 62 or 63.
And she married Larry, and Larry was from the Park Forest, a family, kind of a big family, but he was at Southern Illinois, and they started dating and that sort of thing, and then they decided to get married. And Larry was so poor, he had one pair of pants. That's all he owned, one pair. My dad took him out and bought
I
him
didn't
some
know
clothes.
that.
Yes.
Really?
My dad took him out and bought him some clothes.
Didn't he work at the ballparks? And
Yeah, he was
you guys-
involved in
you
that.
guys kind of,
His brothers and his father actually, and the
Yeah, and
mother
then
worked
you
at the
guys got
concession stand also.
through
So they
them.
were the first ones that, but I don't remember Larry ever working there.
Oh,
I
But,
think he did.
well, they all did, like at the racetrack when they started out, before they went to the ballparks and everything like that, so.
Is that how we got our inn down there?
yeah.
Yeah. So, Larry took me down to the Union Hall to
Yeah.
meet the Union Hall president. Because you had to go down and meet the Union Hall president and, impress him enough so that he would allow you to come work at the place.
Yeah.
And,
What's this?
Yeah, the union
And
ran
so-
the thing.
what's that?
I remember Larry's dad had these special aprons.
Patriots and the
Right.
Dolphins are tied
And
Yeah,
he-
that he
and
made.
he
Right.
taught
He
you
did.
how to
9 minutes
ride
remaining in
the
the fourth
L,
quarter.
Right.
so that you would be safe, because
Right.
you had your change in the,
Oh, yeah.
in the apron. And
And
which
then
you
you rolled
use
it up
as-
and you put it in the bottom of this duffel bag that you carry
So you
around.
had a weapon in case
Right.
anybody, so you
Yeah,
would,
with the belt buckle was enough to be able to theoretically fight him off in that. So this was in
Well, I didn't know that
1970. So this was in 1971, and I was 16 years old. And then I started taking my children don't think I know how to use a screwdriver or take the L, but back then I would take the train in from Flossmoor to downtown at Randolph, which was where Marshall Fields was. And it really wasn't very, it wasn't Chicago like it is today, it was very dangerous. And so I'd get off, and then I'd get on to either the subway to go up to Wrigley Field, or I would take the train back to, the L back to White Sox Park. And then White Sox, of course, had night games back then, and so I would then come back in afterwards with a whole lot of money in my pocket. It was like, I might have as much as $100, which back then was
A lot of money.
huge
Small
amount.
fortune.
Right, and I mean, so Cokes were 25 cents at Wrigley Field, and they were 35 cents at Sox Park. Beers were 85 cents at Cubs Park. And I remember when the White Sox went from 75 cents to $1, nobody thought they'd ever sell another beer. And of course now they're like $9.75 or
Yeah, exactly.
$9.25, right? And then Larry's brothers and his father taught me how to do this, and I really looked up to them because they were very old. They were like 22, 23, 26
Very
years old.
knowledgeable.
And we all had hair down to our shoulders. And, so when I was 16, so then after the Sox game,
Well, you weren't
come back
16 in
down,
71.
and then all the hookers were down underneath the L, before you went over to the Metro to take the train, the catch one every hour or 2 hours train to get home.
how come you never told me about the hookers before?
I don't know when you say catch one every hour, I thought that's.
Yeah,
It was just something, and again, they just taught me, I had friends that lived in, black guys that lived in Cabrini Green, I went and visited, and that was before it was really that bad. And this is, this is 1971, 72, 71 or 72.
That goes in the list.
But now, Brian did that.
I was a vendor at just Sox Park. I never worked at Cubs Park. But I sold Cokes and popcorn and some of the big rock concerts and stuff like that, and as well as I don't know how long I did that. But I remember driving the old Oldsmobile 88 or whatever down there, just sucking gas down like crazy. That thing was just it was like 8 miles a gallon. I mean, we'd only get like $2 worth, just to barely get you there and back. But I also remember those neighborhoods, and you only had to be on kind of one side of the park. The other side of the park was a little more dangerous than the other or whatever.
Really dangerous.
And that was in the late 70s, because I think maybe not, I don't remember, I did that for a little
I
while.
graduated high school in 75. You would have graduated in 77.
Right.
So I don't remember if you did that. Yeah, but I think you did that.
I didn't do
in
it
high
up till
school.
the end of high school because I know I was working at Dominic's, but I know I did it, you know,
Oh, yeah.
fairly
About
late in
19
high school
would've been
because
about
I-
1975.
because after I was driving, it must have been 16 years old. So I was driving down the Dan Ryan, you know, which was like really, you know,
That's
mom and
really
dad
safe.
just let, you know, just, hey, yeah, take the car, you know, whatever, so. But I do remember those experiences quite, you know, quite vividly, the, kind of getting out in the world by yourself, you know, doing the vending and
There
whatnot.
wasn't a lot of over-parenting in how we were raised.
No helicopter.
The whole idea with your grandfather was that you had to learn that you could make it on your own. And if you knew that you could always get a job and that you could always make money, then you were independent. So if you didn't like where you were, you could just stay with you and I'm gonna go get a job somewhere else. I don't have to put up with this. And so they started early with paper routes when they were.
We had lots of jobs.
7 or 8 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Chuck had more different jobs. They both had ice cream.
Yeah, I would drive around on a little
Yeah.
bicycle selling ice
Well, you had to
cream.
get to Homewood because it wasn't legal to do that in Florida.
Right.
And so, but then Dad said, well, you can probably sneak a couple sales on the way over. So you just, yeah, pedaled your heart out till you got to just past Western Avenue School.
Well, one of the stories I really quite vividly remember is Dad was always trying to get us to go in and ask for raises to the paper routes. And it was in downtown Homewood on Ridge Road. And the guy running it was fat. He was huge. He was this huge dude and he sat behind this dirty desk or whatever. He was terrifying. And Dad would drive up in his car and say, go in there and get a raise. And he would sit there. And if we came out and it wasn't a big enough raise,
He sent you back.
he'd send us back. Now, these raises were literally, you'd make $2.10 a week for delivering papers. And we'd come out and we'd get $2.25. And he would say, that's not acceptable. Go back in and get a bigger, I mean, you're talking about. And he did, and we would go in and we would come out and we would feel so good about having done that. But he basically forced it, and the guy was literally like he was huge, and he was, I can still picture that cat, you know?
So what did he say when you went back in?
Oh, well, he would just like, oh my God, and then he'd give you another 10, 15 cents, and you'd leave, so he probably just to get rid of you, but, whatever.
Dad was sitting
Well, I
outside.
told the story this morning, and I remember the first time he made me do that. That was the first one with paper out, and he had the big brown Cadillac.
Yep.
And so he sent me out. He parked right in front, sent me out, and I came back in. He looked through the passenger window and like this, and I said like this, and so the electric locks went clunk. And I just stood there staring at him, and he just went back to reading his newspaper.
Oh my
Didn't say anything.
And those are actually true stories, and it's amazing. But we had, at one time I used to cut like 10 lawns. He could never get us to cut our own, but the ones that we would get paid for.
Yeah, right.
And Grandpa Glenn would come and pick us up and take us to his house in South Holland. Dave Jeffrey and I probably did that more than anybody else.
I did a lot. I grew up in high school.
And take us over there to cut the lawn. I think he paid us $5 or
$5,
$7.
But he fed us too, and it was all the Coke you can drink.
Oh yeah, all the cookies and drinks.
Everywhere, yeah.
But we
All
had
down the stairs, there were Cokes.
lots of paper routes,
remember when
and delivered them in the middle of the winter on my 10-speed with, the paper stacked on top of the 10-speed, riding it through the snow. I mean, literally, it was like, it was crazy, and lots of different lawns we would cut and the like, and it was all get out there and make your
Grandma
money.
Glenn would call and say, you're not gonna let those
Oh,
kids,
yeah.
Oh,
and
God,
then-
you're
kids walk to
crazy.
school, because it's snowing out,
Right, the school was what,
Yeah.
a mile and a quarter maybe
Yeah.
away, and they had to walk to school. And my dad would
Oh,
call
I'm
and
saying,
say,
absolutely
it's
not.
really cold out, you're not gonna let those children walk to school, are you?
Oh, I didn't know this.
Oh, yeah, every
And they're
time.
already on their way, Dad, and so they.
Or you'd say no, and then
Or
they
I'd
were
say-
already gone.
Then we'd be hopping the train.
No, the school was just just under a mile, like 9/10 of a mile. And so we didn't meet the cutoff for actually having buses.
Well, it
We were like
depended.
blocks away from the cutoff.
Bus at the corner for one?
And there was one busy
Not for
street.
elementary school.
Not for
For
elementary.
grade,
Junior high.
for junior high and high
Junior
school.
high, we were far enough away.
And then when Jody and Chuck had raised their kids and they wanted to walk to school, their neighbors were ready to report it.
Yeah,
Because
that's
they were
right.
allowing those children to walk that whole mile to school.
Oh,
And then
really?
Chaz rode his bike to school in the middle of a snowstorm, and then they really wanted to report me.
Oh, no. I didn't know that part.
Oh, yeah. Think about those jobs, you know, then they were confident, they all knew they could always get a job, they could always make a living, so they were independent, so
And they could
that's
ask
really
for
important. And
ordinance,
I
yeah.
see these children are, nowadays, many children that are not allowed to work or do anything.
Well, there's age restrictions and, you know, all these
I
other.
mean, it's a different world, but that was our little world at the time, and that's, you know, it's quite interesting.
I remember Grandma and Grandpa Hruska came out every summer for a month. And the one year, all you boys got to go back with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so jealous. So the next year, I said,
Really?
well, I want to go. And Dad said, well, I think that's fantastic. You should go. Get yourself a job and go. And that was the answer. Get a job, save your money, and go.
I had great.
And so I did. I worked 3 paper routes that whole year, and I saved every dime I had. And we were in Rhinelander, and you took me shopping, and I remember Dad arguing about you going to spend money on clothes for me. I had plenty. And you said to him, I am not sending her out there to your family wearing rags. And you took me out, and then the worst part is you wouldn't let me touch the clothes. I couldn't even take tags off. They were folded underneath my bed until I left for my trip, and it just killed me. Because I wanted those clothes so bad, and I had to buy my own plane ticket to come home.
Kidding.
Yes.
I know I would.
She's got a lot of scars.
I had saved my own plane ticket, and I had my own. I saved all my money for that trip, but you bought me my clothes. And then I drove out with them, and then you and Uncle Ron drove me to Arizona, and I spent a week with Aunt Judy, and then my plane ticket was to fly home from Arizona.
Yeah.
But he said, yeah, absolutely,
That
I
was
think
in
you should go,
67,
get yourself a job and go.
That trip we took, because I
Okay.
had pictures of it out on the web. I have all pictures from that trip, not a lot of them, but from when the boys went. And they were dropping us off at the airport, and Jeffrey was there. He couldn't get on the plane. No, we were all in suit and ties. You know, getting on the airplane.
Well,
and
the
stuff.
only funny thing about that was that,
That's,
you know,
when
that's
you got
when.
dressed up when you flew.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we all had suit and ties, and Grandma Glenn was there, and that's when you could actually, you know, go and actually get on the plane, even if you weren't going to be traveling on the plane.
Yeah.
And Grandma Glenn walks in, we sat in the front row, I remember, of the airplane, and she goes in and she marches into the cockpit, and she says to the pilot, she says, you have my three grandchildren on this plane, so you're gonna make sure you fly it safely. Literally marched right into the cockpit, electric gas.
That was Grandma Glenn?
That was Grandma Glenn when she dropped us off at the airport.
It's just funny how everybody remembers something a little
Yeah.
different.
Purse in hand, you know, like she was, and she just marched right in there.
That's funny.
I remember I was like, I don't know, 8 years old or 9 years old, and Grandma and Grandpa took us to the beach, and there was all these pretty girls walking around in bikinis, and I'm like, I am not marrying an ugly girl. I remember thinking, I literally remember thinking this as an 8 or 9 year old. I was on the beach, and I was like, this is like the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why that stuck with me, but, and then Grandpa driving us back, I think we drove back with him in his front, he had like the first front wheel drive, that Eldorado or whatever the hell that thing was. And we drove to the Grand Canyon. So we drove back from California and we went by the Grand Canyon. My first pictures of the Grand Canyon with the 3 of us standing on the edge of it, you know, kind of looking over from.
I don't remember you guys being gone at all.
I remember being terribly jealous.
You're probably so happy that you're
I
gone.
I was 9 years
probably
old,
like,
just turning 9 years
God,
old.
they're not
in
here.
1960.
So
So I
can
remember
ride
this
maybe
story.
I was 8. I think it was
When you
1969.
boys came back, and you were laughing about
Why don't they go
Grandpa
more
driving.
often?
Bumping into Bazats.
Right, and he'd say, if he just doesn't get out of the way, I'm gonna bump him in the bazats. Oh, really? That's what Grandpa would say.
So
And
Susan
then-
is,
And so then that was your story from then on. Anytime we were driving, you three boys would say, if he doesn't get out of the way, just bump him in the bazats.
Yeah, because Grandpa kept us all really entertained.
Well, and, yeah, I still remember a lot of stuff that we did. I think it was 1969. I keep thinking I was 9 years old, but I think it was actually 1969.
We already got it right here somewhere.
And,
67.
67?
Yeah, here we are all getting on the airplane. If anybody wants to look at these pictures, here's the airplane, here's Grandma and Grandpa's place, and then we
Yeah, but I
went,
remember the,
we went to Mexico.
yeah,
And
we
there
went
we
to
are, here we are at the
Tijuana.
Grand Canyon, so anybody wants to look at these can swipe.
We went to Tijuana. I remember that,
Right.
the Air Force Base there, and there was a sonic boom in there, and the glass on their, to this little courtyard they had in the middle of the house, all shattered, and they had all these little chips. It stayed in place. There was these tiny, tiny little chips. Went to Knott's Berry Farm. I got some of that jellyfish on the beach on my forearm.
Oh, the jellyfish, yeah.
I guess this was an impactful trip for you.
Oh, this was huge. I mean, this was like our first big adventure, basically. I mean, this is-
I mean, I even remember that, because they served you meals. I remember that I ordered shrimp, because we didn't eat much shrimp at home. So I had like fried shrimp for my meal on the airplane going out. More than 6 years old?
23 to 20.
I guess so.
Yeah, and I remember the jumping beans in the,
Oh, yeah,
in
jumping
Mexico. We got
Oh,
the beans,
yeah.
had the little jumping things
I
in
do
it.
think I
The marionettes?
remember you guys coming home, because you had real fun gifts, like the jumping beans and stuff. But I don't remember you leaving, I must have been fun.
do you remember them being gone?
Oh, that's right.
No,
I'm
I just
very
remember
jumpy.
being so jealous that they got to go and I wanted to go back with them and Grandma said, you know, that's what it is, and so I had to wait a
Okay, so
whole
let's
year.
talk about Post Lake for a couple of minutes, because Post Lake was kind of a cool thing. I got quite a number of pictures of Post Lake.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's your place.
Cabin.
that was the cabin in Wisconsin.
What year did you buy that?
It had to be like 65.
I don't remember
six.
exactly, but I know that you were a baby, because they used to complain about your diapers and so they'd make me hold you in the front seat. They didn't want you riding in the back with them. So it must have,
Susan.
Susan.
And you were born in
Susan.
63?
So she was born 64, so it must have.
All right, so it's like probably 65,
66.
So she had stinky diapers, so they didn't want her in the back?
Nobody wanted to sit next to me.
Oh.
It was terrible. And then I would get car sick, so then they
Oh,
didn't,
yeah,
so I got
I
out of the
remember that.
diapers.
Diapers, you were in the back of the station wagon. Dad would not
Barfing,
stop to change you. And so we'd be sleeping with you and your pants fall all the way back there.
And it was,
Probably an exaggeration.
and it was like a 6-hour drive. You know, this is not trivial. I mean, this is like a long drive, and
Well,
so.
then, once you got
But
potty
then-
trained, then you start getting car
But then I
sick.
got car sick, and I got car sick because of McDonald's. And to this day, I cannot stand the smell of coffee in a car. I cannot stand the taste of a pickle. Because you'd stop, and we would, you know, like
Well, you got a
Chuck
lot of
said,
issues.
he'd get, you know, 6 hamburgers and he'd throw them all
He'd just
back to
throw
us.
back.
And the
It'd be
smell
like
of the
feeding the
coffee and the
wolves. Yeah,
pickles
just chunks of
always
meat.
made me sick. And
And they weren't cheeseburgers, they were hamburgers.
no, the thing was
They're not getting rid of.
You'd
No,
think,
no
You would
cheese
just shut
for
them
you.
out. You never got one because they always stole yours.
and you'd think that he'd pull over and let me throw up. No, I hug my head out, going down the road, throwing up.
There's a little exaggeration going on.
It was abusive. Well, you see how abused I am.
Okay, but,
I still
so
can't eat
when
pickles.
we went to Wisconsin, we bought this cottage on the lake, because, you know, you can't take 6 children on a vacation to Europe, like Arlen did with his kids, you know, we couldn't afford to do that, but we bought this cottage and it was a modified A-frame,
Right.
and it had a wonderful, it actually had 2 decks
Yeah.
and a beach. And later we took out the lower deck, so they had a bigger beach. And we had a dock, and we had a raft. And so we would go up there, and we had station wagons, and they could all lay down in the back. So we'd always leave at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and then they could fight amongst themselves until we get to Milwaukee. We'd stop at McDonald's and get some food, and then
Feed
they'd
the
all
lions.
fall asleep. And then they'd sleep the rest of the way, and we'd get up there about midnight, you know.
And then they'd wake us up and we'd have to trudge through 3 feet of snow.
But Dad made us empty the car that night, like you couldn't
Oh,
wait
that
until
night.
morning or something, if I recall.
No, you couldn't wait. So when did you decide to go, and where did the decision to go looking for a summer home type thing
That
come
was your
from?
father's idea, it never even occurred to me.
Yeah.
And I remember, but I
No, I already
remember,
had it picked out.
It's
4
sort
years
of
ago.
like just
Finish.
buying this house, you
Yeah.
know. And I said, there's no way we can afford to have it. Well, let's just go look and see.
so
So was that, so how far,
Fishing.
because that was a long way up there. How did you end up that
Yeah,
far?
what's up?
well, he had done all this research, and this is before the internet. He went up,
This
and
was on the
looked at
Wolf River.
brochures and
This was
drove
a
around.
lake that was made from them
Yeah.
to Wolf River. It was
Mhm.
one of the last wild rivers in the country. And there was wonderful fishing there, so why
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to go?
But I remember being on the trip with you.
Yeah, he wanted
You
to
took
fish
me
and
only, and we
sun.
went up to when they actually made the offer. And I remember being at dinner with you after, so it was like spring, and the realtor had come out of Anago, and we met him at the A-frame, and he had forgotten the keys. So then we broke into the house and sent me through a bathroom
Oh, I
window
remember that.
in
story.
order to get in and come back. And then we went back to the hotel that night, and in that little, and it was like a little, it wasn't Howard Johnson's, but one of those little roadside type places. And then you guys sat at dinner, and he took out a paper napkin, like he did all of his biggest deals, and wrote down exactly how you were gonna come up with the money, where the money was gonna come from, and how he was gonna pay for it. And he talked about, he pulled some money out of a life insurance policy for part of the down payment, and I remember him just sketching this all down on a napkin. And,
So you were like 7 years old probably at the time. so.
Yes, yeah, I
I
missed
don't know if I was that young.
Well, if it was 65, 66, and you were born in 57, and you were.
Well, if I was a year old, he's
So
8 years older than me, so he'd have been.
Well, he was
9.
born in 57, so the math's not that hard.
So what year did we
Well,
buy?
you sure-
What year did
you
we buy
sure
the
that we
cabin?
bought-
What year
you
did we
sure
sell
we
it?
bought it?
Year, and he was
66,
8
he
years
was
older,
probably
that
9 years
math is
old.
not
Yeah,
hard,
yeah.
it's 9.
Jeffrey asked a question, what was your question?
What year did we buy the cabin and what year did we sell it?
What year? I don't remember I don't remember the years, but we sold it whenever all got to be teenagers and you could not possibly want to go to the cabin with your parents. Because all your friends were at home doing fun things.
But then also Grandpa and Grandma bought one.
Next
Yeah,
door,
next
yeah.
door, that was a lot of
And
fun.
They bought it for $11,000 and sold it for $18,000.
They did?
I don't know why I
And then
have
we
that
had
data,
this,
but I do.
this wonderful dog, Maxie.
Yeah.
Who thought she was a child, and she just loved it because,
She's like
you know, she's
Muffley.
a white lab, and so she loved to swim. And she was so well trained that she would swim at heel beside your grandfather.
Yeah,
And-
that's true.
And and then all the kids would swim, they all learned how to swim, and they'd swim out to the raft, and Maxie would swim out to the raft with them, and then they'd jump in, and then she'd jump in.
Right,
And then she could climb the ladder, she could
Climb the
climb.
ladder, she would climb the ladder to the raft, and then we'd all be running, and the raft is going like this, and she'd be going this side, and
And
then
then
we'd
we had
jump
the
in, and then
snowmobiles.
she'd jump in, yeah.
Snowmobiles in the wintertime, we would drive around with the little
Was
sausage
it,
sleds on the
was it
ropes.
Grandpa Glenn that bought
The
the?
dog would pull it.
Spear, yeah.
Yeah, then I think he bought the boat.
The head off your
Yeah,
head
I
when you were
remember the
getting
boat.
cold in the sausage in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And run away with it.
Snowmobiles around in the lake, and we'd do the big
Mhm.
oval with the saucers, the dog would chase you and pull your hair.
Remember when I fell in the lake, David?
Oh, yeah, so we
Yeah,
always
you fell
lost
off
those.
you fell off the pier and nobody quite.
Well, that
knew.
was when I was 2.
That
but
was
what-
true. That's when they
Oh my
started
gosh.
locking, that's
That's
when,
when
if you
they-
see in the movies, you can see the life preservers with a lock.
They literally
Padlock.
padlocked it
So,
up.
okay, so let's tell the whole story so everybody gets it. So, there were a lot of kids up there, and there were about 5 or 6 houses, and they all had dogs and everything, and there were kids who go swimming. So all the bigger kids knew how to swim, and they were down at the friend's dock, and they were jumping in. And Susan was 2, And she just jumped in too. She didn't know how to swim or anything, and she's down in there and over her head in the water. And this neighbor boy saw her and picked her up and pushed her up and rescued her. But she would have drowned because nobody else saw her. What was his name?
Cole Kennedy.
Cole Kennedy. So, so
That
that scared me. So after that, I bought 3 little red, white, and blue striped life jackets and little padlocks I could put on your face, and I locked them in, and they were mortified.
we were, I was mad.
Why do I have, she's the one who jumped in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I did, and I'm
But the 3 youngest always had those life jackets on and they were always locked.
Yep.
The snowmobiling was a really a pretty cool part of the Post Lake as well. And I had some very vivid memories of working with Dad trying to keep the damn things running.
Right.
Because they were really a pain in the neck, because you had to pull the rope out of them. And of course they were cold and they had sat all summer long, and so to try to get them started or whatever. So we would get the spray to take the plug out, spray it in to try to, try to get it to start. And we would sometimes spend hours out there. And I'd be getting him beers, I'd be doing my job. I'd be getting beers while he's working on, working. We'd finally get them running and then try to
get fouled, you have to scrape them.
Oh yeah, you'd have to scrape the plugs off and to try to get them to work. So the Arctic Cat ran pretty well, as a little easier, and then he wanted to get another one. And I remember when he wanted to buy this when we were in Antigo, and he was going to buy this Skidoo, and he didn't have any checks. So he made a check. Somehow he made a check out of some other check, somebody else's check, and he crossed off the numbers on there and wrote his own number. He made a check out of nothing to buy this snowmobile because he wanted to buy it, and he was out of checks. So
And they took it?
and somehow they took it. I don't remember what the whole story was, but I do remember.
I don't remember that, but of course
So-
I wouldn't know.
You'd be the last to know.
Well, we would fire those things up when we got there in the wintertime and just plow through the snow, and literally they wouldn't stop,
And then we'd go duck hunting, and we were really little at this point. We had this wooden boat, and first boat we had there, and it leaked, and it had spiders in it. I remember the spiders were terrifying. It would be cold, and sometimes you're eating a little bit of ice on the water. And so we get in there and we duck down to the front of the boat and curl ourselves all the way down because we had to go all the way down to the river. And it was, early in the morning, barely dawn, if dawn at all. And we go out there.
It was always before dawn. It had to be before
It
dawn.
always, pretty much before dawn. So we get in this boat, freezing, duck ourselves down, and we go out there. And when we got out there, he'd have to feed us. So, we had this little cooker, stove of some variety, and he would literally cook us bacon and eggs in the boat, because that's the only way we would go, is if he could feed us, of course. And Maxie was a great dog, and we never killed a whole lot of ducks, but we did kill some ducks. And
Well, you'd freeze your butt off, and then you'd get there, and you'd have to put out all the
You'd have to put all the decoys
down.
And they had 100 decoys, and you'd have to unwrap them, with a little lead weight around their neck, and unwrap them and put them out there. And then when you're done hunting after getting no ducks, then you have to take them out of the water, put them back in, freeze your ass off, drive all the way across the river. And he go, wasn't that fun? And David was the only one that ever said yes. The only true sportsman in the family. Chuck probably only went twice, and I was like, why are we doing this, Dad?
Well, you also went ice fishing.
Yeah, we did.
And go out and they would, drill the hole in the ice and everything. And actually, Maxie was the only one who was.
Maxie, the only one that really went ice fishing. We'd go visit.
Her ass would freeze to the ice.
Eventually he started bringing out carpet squares, like the sample squares, he'd bring out carpet squares.
She's
Carpet squares.
Her seat would warm up the ice with enough to melt, and then it would refreeze.
So the times we went up there, we would go up around the holidays. I do remember taking the turkey carcass up and making turkey a la king around Thanksgiving. The long weekends with Thanksgiving.
And then we pack it all.
And then Christmas we go typically a little longer, and then we'd try to find our way up there in the summertime.
And we always have 4th of July, because
4th of
remember the
July.
boat
Yeah.
parades
Yeah.
on the lake?
But also, the first thing they would do when they get up there in this wintertime
It's like fire.
is they would make a skating rink. And so they'd take the snow shovels out and they would shovel snow off of the ice and then they'd have this perfect skating rink, so they.
Well, it was never perfect, the ice was always kind of easy, but we would do that, yes.
Oh, it's right.
When did he convince you to buy that land across the street, that 32 acres?
Well, that was
Boondoggle,
that was
was-
Grandpa Glenn and him that got that idea. And they even were gonna lay it out for,
They were
for
gonna
a
develop
cabin.
it.
How did you drag him into all?
32 acres.
32 acres, you probably had to have it, right?
But then they sold it and later on.
No, they gave it away the Cub Scouts or something.
They were only able to sell a few lots off of the thing, and ended
Well,
up, and
the
then
people
it
live there
had
now.
the
The
endless
Coke Kennedy
land for the
bought
longest
a
time, we
lot
already
there,
sold the
I
cabin,
heard
they
at
still
one
had the
time.
land, and finally,
And built a
figured out
house
a way
there.
to donate it to the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, I think he did go.
But,
because-
I remember, I think, what, he paid $8,000?
Oh, you know, another good story would be the travel park. That would be another little,
Yeah, the travel's.
Speaking of boondoggles,
Okay, so the travel park, so he got this idea.
this was his big.
Good,
It's always
good
start with,
insurance
he got
agency,
this
that was doing
idea.
fine. But he got this idea, he saw that Holiday Inns was starting a string of franchises that were camping parks, and they're called travel.
Oh, yeah,
Travel Park, travel with
I
with
remember
an
that.
L and a park. It
Right.
was a franchise of Holiday Inn that had started it. Of
And
course,
so-
you guys finished it just before the 1970s gas crisis.
And so we built this,
what year was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember these years.
I went up
It's
to
all
work and I
blurry.
was in I went up to work and Grandma and Grandpa would come in,
That's right.
so they developed, so I was in 8th grade going into high school when I worked there, and had already been there for at least a couple of years. So it would have been when I was in junior high school, and that was with Bob Clower and him.
Bob Clower was the primary.
And you guys laid this all out, and Grandpa was involved in it somehow. I remember them laying out.
Grandpa didn't have any ownership in it, no.
No, but
Just
I remember
Clower's
him
in it.
laying out the plans on that metal and metal table that he had in his South Holland home all the time. And then, so you guys actually built it, bulldozed it, laid the pads, put in the electric,
Oh, I
all
didn't know
that
you
kind of stuff.
built
Built
it.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, we go up there and they built the gift shop office type place. And then Grandma and Grandpa would come out from California for the summer and actually run the place.
Yeah, couple summers
And
they did.
Couple summers they did that.
I don't
And,
know.
but then, yeah, it didn't go so well, because
Madison?
literally after they built it in the 70s, the first oil embargo happened, and you know, you're talking about getting McDonald's and gas on the way to Wisconsin. Gas was 26 cents a gallon. And that. But then anyway, so then that kind of all went downhill, because
So we sold
nobody, yeah.
We
we
sold it to
it.
somebody.
Remember
we
there
told
was
the
an
story
old
this morning.
farmhouse on the property that ended up being torn
There was
down?
there was
Do you
no
remember
farmhouse.
how?
I remember that it was
Spider
filled
webs.
with, it was filled with stuff, but there was an old, really super cool antique cash register.
Right.
And Dad put it in the gift shop and sold it for $100. I remember it having a $100 price tag. It was a neat
Yeah,
old one.
and then they cleaned that up, and then they had like a worker dude when I was there that they hired, and he lived in that property. And then Grandma and Grandpa lived in a trailer, a RV trailer type thing, and that's where I lived when I went up there to work with them and that.
You know, we got the Hruska house?
Yeah, Grandpa and Grandma ran it, and they ran the store, and
I
they.
remember that.
And
So they had to be around 1970,
So Chuck was about
71
12
or
or
2.
13, or I don't know how
Well,
exactly.
I was in 8th grade when I worked there, and it had already been going for.
So he goes up there for the summer.
Right.
And of course, this is the 70s, and all the kids have this really long, awful hair, you know. It wasn't so that it was long, but it was messy, you know. So he decides, or his grandparents decide he needed a haircut.
Right.
And they took him to the local barber shop, who of course, being from rural Wisconsin, didn't like long-haired kids from Chicago. He gave him the worst haircut in the world. I mean, it was just.
It was a week before I started high school. I was traumatized for the rest of my life.
He just butchered his haircut.
I wore stocking caps for the first 3 weeks of high school.
I think the guy did it deliberately.
That could have been.
I mean, it was really.
Yeah, I didn't have that story. I mean, I do remember those. I remember when I was in junior high and I got a haircut and if it wasn't right like this, I didn't like it. And those pictures are really scary.
Another story, you talk about typical dad and the way that we were raised, and when going up there, he wasn't gonna be able to take me, so he said, well, you're just gonna take a Greyhound bus from downtown Chicago. And I said, well, how do I do that? He goes, you're gonna get on that train right there, you're gonna go all the way till it stops, you're gonna get off, and then you're gonna go down Randolph, and that's where you can buy yourself a bus ticket, and you're gonna do this. And I was in 8th grade. And I remember I got off the train, and I got off, and those of us that remember the train, there was South Water Street exit, which nobody ever really went to. Well, I just got off, and I just didn't know where I was, so I just followed everybody else. So I didn't end up on Randolph like I was supposed to. And that's when I learned how you keep walking across the street back and forth, acting like you know where you're going, but really having no idea. No, there's no phones or anything at this point. And so I asked a cop who told me how to get to the Greyhound station, which was over on the other side of Canal. And so I walked down there, found a bus ticket, and I got a bus ticket and then got to Delavan, Wisconsin.
That is amazing. I never knew that.
They didn't, you know.
Well, that's what it was. It's not like you're checking in the whole way.
What's that?
You
Yeah,
said, well,
Delavan, Wisconsin.
you have no idea where you got off the rails.
Right.
No cell phones. But look how good, well you all turned out. So
We
it's a
have
pretty
a few ticks, you know, and twitches every once in a while, but yeah. How about maybe some stories about when Dad started in the insurance business, because you two were down in Champaign-Urbana, and he started in his junior year.
We were going to get married, and so he decided, well, he better have a job. We were still in college, but he decided he better have a job. So and his parents did not want us to get married. Because his father was very upset because he was sure that as soon as he got married, he'd quit college and not finish. And
Oh, really?
Even he was the first one, you know, there was one other nephew in the family that had gone to college, but it was, you know, his father had to quit work, had to quit school at age 14 and go to work because his father died in the pneumonia epidemic, and then there were all these children, and the mother didn't work, so all the boys had to quit and get jobs, and he had to quit school at 14 and get a job. So to have his son graduate from college was really important, and he was just sure that if he got married, that he would not finish. But anyway, we did get married, and he did finish, but he decided that, well, he's getting married, he better get a job. And so he went to the local prudential agency and talked them into letting him come to work, and he got his license and went to work there. He was very successful at it. As a matter of fact, he was so successful that then he didn't take any interviews with any, I think he interviewed with IBM, but he was making more money part-time as a student than anybody was offering a graduate, you know, at that point.
Right.
So that's why he started selling insurance.
Yeah, then he was a branch manager, and Grandma came, and as a story where Grandma came down and saw his name stenciled on the door and started crying because nobody had ever done that.
Yes.
But then,
but she cried before that because she found out that he was going to work as an insurance agent. Because the way she remembered it was the insurance agent was the guy who came and knocked on the tenement door and collected 15 cents for insurance, you know, every week, you know, and so she would say, yeah, well, he got all that education and now he's going to get this mediocre job, and it was just a failure. But then she was okay once she saw his name on the door.
well, then you fast forward, and I had been in the insurance business not very long. It was the first few years. And I was at a life insurance meeting or something. And a guy came up to me and he said, well, you must be Charles Hruska's son. And I said, yeah, I am. And he goes, let me tell you a story. He says, I'm the guy that Prudential put in charge of running a national ad campaign on your father across the country because he was the youngest person who ever hit what was called the MDRT, $1 Million Roundtable, ever. He might still hold that record, but he was the youngest one to do that. So Prudential apparently ran this national ad talking about this successful young guy, and you can do it too, and this is the picture of Prudential and all this kind of stuff. And I remember, I went back and I said, why didn't you tell me this? And he just kind of chuckled and said, yeah, there's
Well, I have some letters on the website you guys all get access to, which are some of his letters of accommodation that he had from his late 50s and early 60s on the website. Because it's pretty interesting how he's getting these awards for selling.
I mean, he was a real superstar.
Yeah, he also started by selling, Chanute Air Force Base was in Rantoul, and every Air Force pilot or mechanic or whatever, all had to go through Chanute Air Force Base. And so there were these trailer parks, they'd all lived in these trailer parks, and so he and Denny Bing would go down the trailer parks, knocking on doors, selling these little life policies, and that's how they started. And Denny didn't do it very well or didn't very long, so he's when he became the county clerk down there. And that's how he met Doc Bagby and those guys, was all from the trailer parks and that. And then fast forward to in the 70s, late 70s or so, and that's when he sold a group auto program to Chanute Air Force Base. So
not to the base, but to the credit
union.
Credit union there.
Right, and it was with Aetna Insurance Company, and so these guys would get their first paycheck. There were also more auto dealerships in Rantoul than any other town of its size too, because these flyboys would get their first paycheck, and they would run down to the Pontiac dealer to get a Firebird, and they couldn't get the Firebird unless they got the insurance. And so he had gotten them to give a discounted insurance program for them, and so then they would come over to the office we had down there, buy their insurance, go back up and pick up their Camaro or their Firebird. The problem is then they'd crash it down the road like the next day or two. So it was a money losing thing for Aetna, and they came to Dad and said, "Whoa, hell no, we got to stop this." and that's when Mom was going down. I was in college, you were in high school, and Mom was taking the Amtrak's down about two days a week or whatever, and running that little office down there, and taking the train back. I remember some of that, and that's how you got out of the life insurance only business and got into the property and casualty business. Because the deal was, Aetna said, okay, well, we're going to kill this program, but we'll give you a contract to sell other regular products like regular people for like 7 years. And then he did the same thing with Continental and the Housewares and the Optometrist Association. Don't you remember being at the kitchen table and stuffing envelopes and stamping?
I remember the optometrist.
On
95th Street in our
We got paid like a penny a piece.
And the big thing was they got the letter folding machine.
You actually got fired because you couldn't stamp the return stamp straight. And it was always crooked. Dad finally said, "Get out of here."
Probably because you're reading too many White Castle murders that were down the street. Remember that?
Remember those?
You got fired for the stamps?
Apparently I did. I don't quite recall that.
She suppressed that memory.
Well, she was, again, she was 8 years.
She was probably the smartest one.
8 years.
I can remember this.
Very clever, I'd say.
But yeah, we'd stuff those things, and then they'd do the mailings to all these uptowns.
I remember that.
So you wrote a nice little article that hopefully everybody will read about flying airplanes. You want to do a little summary of those years?
Oh, yeah.
I read that one, that was a good one.
Well, start out at how you got involved in the flying with CFP and all that.
Well, that's in that story. Did you read that?
I did read
I think everybody got
a
that.
big portion of it.
So the next part of that, which I haven't written yet, is going to be about some of my adventures. And I did have quite a few adventures, because safety was so important with the CAP, and so we both immediately started working on our instrument licenses after we got our private pilot license, because you're a private pilot and then you go someplace and the clouds come over, you can't go with it, you can't take off and go anywhere, it's illegal because you can't fly through the clouds, you know. So then we started taking instrument lessons, we got our instrument licenses, and then after that I got a commercial license, he did not, but I got an instrument license. And I guess the first adventure was the first trip I took by myself, right after I got my instrument license. And I will say, I was absolutely the best pilot I was ever going to be at that point, because it's very intensive. You have to fly a lot with a hood over your head so you can't
Really
see out the
intense,
window.
yeah.
You have to fly by the instruments. And you have to know all the radio and all the navigation, and you have to know it cold, and you have to know where you are at all times, because you are sometimes you're flying through clouds and you can't see where you're going or anything, and you can't get disoriented. So I can't remember how old you all were there, but I think I was just about half the teenagers at that point.
So you took a fly.
I was in
Fly
college.
away.
I was in
And I
college.
was just,
I was
and
in
of
college,
course, my
but
dream,
the
all the
boys
time
were
you were
still-
growing up, I kept thinking, if only I could just have a little apartment that I could just go to sometimes for a few hours, there by myself, you know. But I remember I had just gotten my instrument license, and I thought, I just gotta get out of here, I can't take this anymore. I know I was probably mad at your father about something, and so this Continental rep, who kind of had a crush on me anyway, he owned a condo in Florida, and he said, well, anytime you want to go down there, yeah, I'll give you the key, you can just go stay in my condo. And I said, okay, I'll take it next week or something like that. And I remember that I had just gotten the instrument license, and I went out there, and all these guys were standing around on the tarmac around and as I took off, because I filed my flight plan, and I was instrument rated, and it was a low lying clouds, and I took off and went right through those clouds and up above them, and it took off for Florida. And all these guys are done it. You know.
What's that woman doing?
Yeah, what's crazy?
That isn't exactly what they said. There was something regarding how brave I was. And that was a good trip, and I went down and I didn't get quite there. I stopped at this airport to get, in northern Florida, to get gas, and then I could see thunder and lightning in the distance, so I decided, okay, I better not go any further, and I stayed overnight, and I went down. I was at Fort Lauderdale, I think, and the weather was disappointing. It wasn't such a great trip, but I was by myself, and nobody passed me around or anything like that. So then I started back, and this was the first time that I really appreciated how much I had learned, because I was flying north and going up through Georgia, and my next stop, I think it was, is there an Auburn or something, it started with an A, and that's where I was going to go. And I was talking to the center, and they were saying, okay, you know, it's about time, you have to make a right turn here. And I looked at all my instruments and I said, that's not right, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, no, I think you've made a mistake, I'm not there yet, I should not turn here. And he said, oh yes, we can see you, you're on the radar, we know where you are, you should make a right turn. And I looked at my instruments again, and he was wrong, and I knew he was wrong, but I wasn't in the clouds or anything. And so I said, okay, I'm going to cancel this flight, I'm going to go IFR after that. And I followed my own instruments, and I was right, and I got to the right airport. And that was a really important lesson, in that the other guy who's supposed to be the expert isn't always right.
Yeah.
You know, and if I'd done that, God only knows where I'd have been. And I think what happened was that when you put my information into the computer, it attached to the wrong airplane.
Yeah.
And so that was a really good lesson. And I remember coming back to the airport and talking there and giving a talk about it, you know, how important it was. So.
And then you did the Powder Puff Derby.
And then I did the Powder Puff Derby one, which I wrote about in the story, with Nancy Higgins and I through the helicopter, and that was a whole lot of fun. And then there was, so probably the most exciting time I had, which I will write about this, but I will tell it to you now. I was going to see my sister Judith, who lived in Phoenix. And I was going by myself, and I was in 182, just single engine plane. And so I had to make a couple of stops. And the last stop before the Rocky Mountains was Garden City. Now, one thing, your father and I had gone, flown over the mountains to California one time, and we'd stopped in Denver, and we'd gotten mountain flying lessons from somebody. So it wasn't like the first time I'd ever flown over mountains. So I knew things about it. And I also knew that afternoons are very bad for flying over mountains. And so I got there in the afternoon, and it looked like everything was going to be all right. The weather looked all right, and I took off to fly over the mountains to Phoenix, and I could tell the winds were much stronger. My headwinds were much stronger, and I was not going to be able to get across there. Besides, it was starting to build up clouds. So I turned around and I went back, landed, and I'd been out about half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. And I thought, well, I wonder if I should top off the tank. And I thought, that's silly. It's half hours of gas. I'm not going to bother with that. I stayed overnight, got up real early in the morning, checked the weather, everything was fine. And they started off across the mountains. And again, the headwinds were much worse than they had said they were going to be. And I was making, you know, I was making my airspeed was fine, but my ground speed across was not very much. And it soon became apparent that I might not make it over those mountains because I wasn't going to have enough gas because the winds were so bad. And so, but I was too far to go to turn back.
Oh my God.
So it got to be a little scarier and scarier. So I thought, okay, I have to make absolutely the best use of the gas that I have so that I can get across here in Spiders. So I kept thinning back the mixture so that I was using less gas, and thinned it as far as I could and still keep it running. And then I thought, and I kept looking for a place to land, emergency landing. Well, now I'm telling you in those mountains, there are no emergency landings. So I thought, okay, I have 2 tanks and I have to use all the gas, so I will run on one tank until it runs out, and then I'll switch tanks. So I did that, and I also climbed, so I had lots of altitude in case I didn't come down. So my palms are sweating. So I'm flying over these mountains, and the wind is really strong, and I'm looking for airplanes, and I run the one gas tank all the way out, and I'm going to tell you, when the engine stops, it is really quiet. But all you have to do is just flip the switch over to the other tank, and then it starts up again, and then we're a little further. And it was getting really close, and I finally thought, okay, I better call for help. So I called the center and declared an emergency. And I told them where I was, and I had been going to land at Phoenix Airport. And I said, I need to know the nearest airport that I can get to. And they told me where it was, exactly where I was, and they could see me on the radar and everything. And so it was getting really, really close. But I finally got over the mountains, and I could see the airport. Then I was so high that I had to do S-turns to get down so that I could land, you know, and get on it. And I landed on the runway, and I turned onto the taxiway, and it stopped.
Oh my God. Ran out of gas.
I ran out of gas. And they had to push me the rest of the way in, and they said, the FAA is on the phone for you. But they were really nice, and they just said, we want to make sure you landed all right and everything was okay.
You ran out of gas on the runway.
I just
On
turned
the
off the
taxiway.
runway. I got no further.
Oh my God.
And
Mother!
And I was perfectly calm through the whole thing, and because I'm the person that if there's an emergency, you want to have me with you, because I will be very calm through the whole thing. But at night, I would have dreams and nightmares about it, you know, and wake up in a sweat because it came on later. So that was my most exciting.
This was the story that,
Most
That-
exciting.
where you realized you wanted to marry that woman.
Well, then that, I mean, that was the most
She knew that.
exciting. But there was another story where you flipped the airplane on the landing.
I
Well,
remember
but that wasn't me, that was your father.
Oh, that was. I thought you were in that, no, you see, you were in that plane
No,
too?
I was there, but I wasn't
Yes.
flying, he was the pilot. in
Yeah, but
charge.
you were in the passenger seat,
And I
right?
was in the passenger.
Because I remember him telling the story, the first thing he did was unhook
And
his
hit his
seatbelt
head.
and hit his head, and
And you
you were just like, well, I gotta think
No,
about this.
that's not really true. So, you know, it was a very short landing, and he came in and it was a bad crosswind, and he didn't give it enough rudder, and so it just very gently went, just like that. We had a guy that was riding in the back, but we were all hanging upside down there, and we said, okay, we better unpack loosen our seatbelts and get out of here, just in case the plane catches on fire. And of course, everybody is running.
I was part of that.
Oh, you
I
were
was
part of
the
that?
one- we were in CAP and I was carrying the fire extinguisher.
Oh, I didn't
And
know.
we were running as fast, as hard as we could out there, because we didn't know it was
No, I-
gonna
I
blow
understand
up
the
or
difference.
We
whatever.
didn't get hurt, nobody was
No.
hurt, we got out, but the plane was totaled.
And you got a brand new airplane?
And so that's when
I
we
heard a
get
slightly
rid of
different
it.
story. I heard that you were in there with Roy, mechanic,
Roy, yeah.
and the reason why you guys went up for this quick spin is because you just worked on the plane and wanted to check it out real quick.
I don't
But
think,
that,
no, I don't think that's,
the plane hadn't been
I think we
fueled
gave
up
him a
very
ride.
much, and so the airplane was very light. And it was a bad
I heard it
crosswind,
was a
kind of
Well, I
weird.
don't know about that.
I don't know, that's just
Should
a
have
story
been
that I
in,
heard.
should have been in.
Yeah, you might have heard that one, I don't think
So
that.
it was over, and that was the end of 206, and then we got going into 202.
So what
yes.
caused you to want to become, to go into the Civil Air Patrol? What triggered you to say, let's do this? I mean, what was
Because I
the?
always wanted to learn how to fly,
You just
and I
said-
didn't,
Yeah.
I just never.
I
I
thought
like
we
the
saw the
part
airport
about-
or something on accident or something in Park Forest, and, I mean, somehow, who got?
Well, Dad met Ed Stewart, I think, right?
Your
And
father
then,
met Ed Stewart, who told him he was learning to fly
Oh, that's
at
right.
this nice little airport and that belonged to the Civil Air Patrol, and it was very reasonable. And so we decided we would go and do that too.
But it was the sign above your washer and dryer in the basement that inspired you to, right? Tell me that. You know what I'm
My
talking
sign
about?
The
above
Phi Beta
washer
Kappa.
was my Phi Beta Kappa
Yeah, right.
To remind you that you are.
To remind me that I am better than a laundress.
I mean, that was it, right?
It was up there, it was up there the entire time you had the houses, that certificate was above the washing machine.
Right.
I made a Kappa certificate.
That's very inspirational.
well, flying was a pretty big deal, because I got my pilot's license and Dave got his pilot's license and you got your glider license. I have just a couple of really nice pictures of you right after you had gotten your pin. You're showing off your pin.
Well, and there's a
Like, 'cause I
newspaper
saw-
story.
And there's a
that was got
newspaper
clippings
story.
of, she was about her,
I was
she was 14 years old
14.
and she soloed a glider. And it was in
Did
the
I know
newspaper.
that? Really?
I actually soloed an airplane before I soloed a car.
Really?
I did, because it was just after my 16th birthday, and so early June, and I was taking summer school. Well, that's the summer I learned to fly, and I was taking summer school for my driver's education, and I had not yet gotten my license, and I truly sold an airplane before I sold a car.
Oh, wow.
That's my kind of thing.
Well, I
So-
I remember taking those glider lessons and such, and they wanted me to solo and everything. And I just don't think any of this is a very good idea.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be up in this big metal plane with no engine?
All by myself.
All by myself.
Yeah, I never did the glider thing. That didn't seem real smart to me.
And I'm
but-
supposed to find an air current? What? I don't think so.
Well, you have lots of friends through that. I mean, you had lots of, there's lots of really nice pictures of parties,
Well, yeah,
of
they
the
did,
Flossmoor
yeah.
parties
Yeah.
with the Civil Air Patrol people, and then you
We
also
did-
cruised
we did
around the
good. We
country.
rescued people.
Yeah.
And you had that map in the basement with all the little dots of the places that you guys had landed. And And there were hundreds of pins on there, literally, I mean.
Remember that plane accident, Marty
Goodman.
Goodman, thank you, and they died, he went up, he was drunk, wasn't he?
Yes, and this is the thing, you can't save people from themselves, you know?
No.
He was
I mean,
flying.
And he
he was
took
driving.
his son and his son's
It is
friend.
illegal to fly if you have had
As a
alcohol
single
to
drink.
drink for, what is it,
24.
12 hours or?
24.
24 hours or something like that. And
Sometimes
we
it gets the
we knew
pilots.
Marty had a
Stop
drinking
him.
problem, and we suspected he would fly something, but nobody could catch him, you know? And he took his son up.
And a friend.
2 friends.
No.
No, one friend, because that one friend is
I
the
thought it was
only
just his
one that
son.
lived.
And his what?
His son and him died in that, because we were on the search and rescue for that. And I wasn't with the team that found them, but another team found them. And him and his son had died, and that other boy lived. He
Where
was
did
in
they
the
crash
back.
in a field or something, or
Mhm.
trying to
In a
land? or what?
cornfield.
In a cornfield?
I don't know what I don't know if we
I think
ever
it was
knew what
ice.
happened, but he was
Ice
found in
cream.
a cornfield.
I heard what happened, I mean, at the time, they said that, you know, he was playing games and he was doing this, like this, on purpose.
Oh, good.
And, just
Stalled out.
when he went in.
Stalled.
So, but there were quite a few friends that, you know, a handful of friends that died, the Tenangas, was it? Over the mountains, he had that souped up airplane, your engine too big, and, tore the airplane apart, he and his wife going across the mountains.
I don't remember that, I do remember one couple that were flying back from the west and who died, and I don't know that we ever knew the reason. But generally, people doing the wrong thing, you know, like I said in that article, you know, you can do, one thing can go wrong, and you can handle that, and you can handle the second thing wrong, but you can never handle the third thing wrong. And a perfect example of that is John Kennedy Jr. who had 100 hours, and
Should never have been.
which was not enough. He had no instrument, no more than minimal instrument training at all. And he's going to fly from New York City to an island. Well, I'm going to tell you that the sky and the ocean can come together and you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
tell where the division is. So he didn't have enough experience. And then there's his wife and sister-in-law, I think.
Right.
One of them was late, and so they took off later in the day than they
Right.
should have, okay? So
That's
that
true.
was the third thing, you know, he only had 100 hours, he didn't have instrument experience, and
And
they
then
took
took
off
off
late.
too late.
And you know what happens, they got out there and they got disoriented, they couldn't tell what was up or what was down, and the motion from the sky or
Yeah.
anything, and they killed themselves.
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't believe the instruments, I think, and then he just ran right into the ocean.
Yeah, that's the first
Well, what's
thing you
weird-
know.
That's what happens, I mean,
You
you
don't.
look out, your tendency is to look out the window, if you haven't been trained, that you look right at the instruments, and that's the only thing you believe, and you don't believe anything that's outside the window.
Yeah.
You
When I
can't-
was in college, I met my college roommate, Mark Schlaze, and he had a pilot's license too. And one of the things that we did that was quite memorable was, I think I was a junior, and we rented a 6-passenger Cherokee 6, which was because he belonged to a flying club in the Quad Cities, and he would rent different planes. He had a lot of hours, quite a number of hours. Anyway, so we rented a 6-passenger plane, and Betty and I, and him and his girlfriend, and another couple, we packed it full of camping gear, and we flew it to the Bahamas and camped on this little deserted island for 2 weeks, you know, and rode around in boats. And it was really a very incredible life experience. But when we took off from West End, we took off from Florida to head to West End, Bahamas, there was this little itty bitty cloud that we could see, you know, way out there. It was like 100 miles. And this little itty bitty cloud just grew and grew and grew and grew, and we could tell it was turning into a thunderstorm. But we were like, you know, far enough over the water that we didn't want to go back to Florida. You know, we didn't want to turn around and go back to Florida. So we had to land, and I was in the passenger or the right seat, and I was in charge of raising the tower on the radio, and I couldn't get them on the radio. I just couldn't figure out. I could hear them, but they couldn't hear me. It was really the strangest thing in the world. But the cloud had grown really huge, and we had to land. I mean, we were going to land. So we told them what we were doing on the radio, and we landed, and the customs people came out, it was like Idi Amin. I mean, this guy was black and he was huge, and he had all these other, and they, they met us out there. And it turns out we made a 727 do a go-around.
Oh.
Because we came in and landed, and they had, at their airport, something I'd never heard of, they had a different transmit and receive frequency on the radio, which I had never heard about before. And, Aaron never heard about it since or anything, but we told them what we were gonna do. We were gonna land, because we had to land, because this idiot, like you said, that little storm can grow into a big storm. And we ended up landing, and this guy, and they took everything out of our thing. They searched everything. I mean, they really kind of gave us the, sort of the go-around on the whole thing or whatever. But that was kind of, one of our little experiences. And we had, on the way back from that trip, Mark had forgot to flip from the right tank to the left tank, and the gas and the engine quit. We were over Georgia. And he immediately, like before I even knew what happened, he reached up and flipped the other one. But it does get really quiet up there when you're in the airplane and that thing just stops and you're like, oh my God, whatever. But those experiences flying around, but the 150 that you and I actually bought together,
Right.
when I got the little bit of money from the insurance from the car accident that I was in when I was a senior in high school, we bought the 150 for $5,250.
And didn't you rent it out? That's how you
And we
paid for it?
and we rented it out, and so we would rent it out, and then I would take it for some weekends to go to college, and the cool kid in college with the airplane, and which was really neat. But I have a lot of pictures. I flew to Champaign with Betty to visit you and Joan over there, and I have pictures from that trip, and
Well, I wanted to fly in.
it was a different.
I remember that little 150, I remember
That was
going into one of those
great
airports
plane.
and I can't remember whether I was getting my qualifications.
I was
It had-
homecoming
it had
weekend.
power, and what?
I think it was homecoming weekend, and you got out of the airplane, and you literally were green.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
But-
you
but
were
I
like-
remember going to one of these airports, and it's like, Cessna 150, can you keep your speed up? There's a DC-9 about to run you over. I'm like, trying to land at high speed.
I remember when we
Get off the
flew,
runway.
when we flew the gliders, and Bill Wickersham, who flew in Korea,
He was the guy
and
in
he
the
flew
Mooney.
the Corsairs in
Right,
Korea.
right. He's a
And every time we
pilot.
would land, he'd be behind me, because you're just you in front, and he'd be behind. He was my instructor. And we would land, and we'd come down, and he'd grip my shoulder and say, "Good job, you've cheated death again."
Right.
And it was like, "Oh, poor she."
I did
I'll
like
never
flying with
forget
that
him
guy,
doing that.
because I'd
Yeah,
fly.
he was so
nuts.
scary.
I'd fly with him, because he'd pull the gliders, and I'd be in the plane with him, and then there's the whole thing, we'd unhook from the glider, but then he'd like to do these tricks.
Yes.
And he would do this, he'd go up and he'd stall. And I'm like, why are we doing this? And then he'd do all these tricks, and I'm like,
Well, I'll tell you a Bill Wickersham story. So we had the 206. For those of you who don't know, the 206 is a 6-passenger single-engine plane. And so
Really?
he was with me, and we were going to pick up Chuck I think it was Chuck, at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. But we had to go to Indiana, do something for CAP first. And of course, he's a fighter pilot,
Yeah.
and he's a smart aleck, but he's a
Smart
very
aleck.
good pilot. So he's riding on the right side, and it's my plane, and I'm the pilot in charge. And we go to land in Champaign-Urbana, and there's a bad crosswind. And this plane was unique in that you could stow the rudders. And so he was on the right-hand side, and he's fiddling around with the instruments. And I said, stop that. You don't know what you're doing. You've not been in this plane before. And he's fiddling around. So we were flying in this plane, and there was a strong crosswind. And he said, oh, never mind. I'll help you with the left rudder. And I'm pushing the left rudder as hard as I can to keep from flipping over and everything. And I finally landed and get down there. And I look over, and I said, oh, yeah, you were a big help. You were fiddling around with things. You stowed your pedals. You weren't helping me at all. I did this whole thing. So you don't want anyone to touch your instruments. You keep your fingers off of it.
Yeah.
There's only one pilot in charge whenever you were flying an airplane.
Those were some
And if I
wild.
relied on him, we could have flipped over.
Oh,
Finally
yeah.
found
Well,
out.
that's the thing about flying airplanes. I mean, you're like, it's kind of a near-death experience every time you do it. I mean, it's like, and one of the
That's why I
reasons,
quit.
one of the reasons it was kind of weird to me was I'd be flying back from Macomb and I would get sleepy. I'd be flying in the afternoon and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm having my sinking spell. I'm like
Oh,
sleeping.
right.
So I'd like open the window and kind of stick, get the wind blowing on me. And I'd be like getting really
It was
sleepy.
real easy to get sleepy on those long
Yeah, because
trips.
you basically, your voice, until you're landing, or taking
You're just
off,
kinda sitting there.
you're basically just sort of
You're
sitting there cruising around. And of course, the radios, you had those ADF radios, those AM radios that you would get like, you try to cross-reference the signals from two different AM radio stations, and it was really, at least in this airplane, it was really primitive. So we would occasionally get lost, and we would see a town down there, and we'd just zoom down to look at the water tower.
no.
Okay, that is Geneva or whatever, and then you just start flying up, but those were some wild times.
Wow.
So the years when you first got started was probably what, 74, 5?
Yeah, I put it in that article, I think it was 41 years old, so that would have been, I was born in
77.
so it's-
76?
Because I was at college when this started.
And I was
That's
a
why they
teenager.
still
We were
in high school, and they were
Yeah.
able to take the lessons.
So
But
when
that was
did you do
it.
Panama?
That was really a good thing to do, I mean, because we were doing good. There were no satellites, there was no GPS. If- And everything was by radio, and so if a plane went down, and then the ELT that's in the tail of the plane would send out a radio signal, which was picked up at Scott Air Force Base, and the Air Force would call Chicago CAP office and say, we've got an ELT alarm in such and such an area. And then they would assign it to somebody, which was usually us, because we had the airport. And so we would have to follow that radio signal to find out where it was. Well, usually it was some guy who, these were not audible to human ears. So usually it was some guy.
Hard
who made a
landing or
bad
something,
landing,
yeah.
hard landing, put his plane in the hangar, went home and went to bed. Meanwhile, we're out there trying to.
Flying around trying to find them in the
Trying to
weeds.
find
Yeah.
them, But we did rescue people. I mean, we did find crashes, and do searches. It was a good thing.
Well, you
to
found
do.
people that was too late to rescue too.
Yeah, we did rescue, we found a plane in a cornfield that was up, and the people had been hanging upside down for more than 24 hours. The pilot was dead, but the woman was alive, and she
Oh, wow.
survived. And we found her by using the ELT signal.
Wow.
There's so many remarkable things about the two of us, because I was learning to fly in 71, 72 through about 74, which just about the time you were.
Right.
And I was doing search and rescue in the mountains.
Yes, but you were doing mountain rescue,
Mountain
not
rescue,
from airplanes.
No, not the airplane.
That was
But
one of the things that was so unique when we met, because we were both in flown airplanes, we both done search and rescue.
Yeah.
we both drove the same car.
Drove exactly the same car, same make and model.
Well, those were some neat years with your different friends. You can see them in the parties and all that kind of stuff. The people you hung out with and then you slowed down flying. I think you stopped sooner than Dad did, couple of years.
That's because I got sent to California on
Yeah.
assignments,
Right.
and I didn't have an airplane. And if you don't fly at least 50 hours, you shouldn't fly.
Right.
If you don't fly at least 50 hours a year, you shouldn't fly. Besides, how many more holes in the sky could you poke? After a while, you've done everything, you've been everywhere. We flew to Acapulco, we flew to California, and we flown everywhere and rescued people. And then what more is there to do?
South Carolina.
Grandma Adventures.
What about the condos in Panama City? Talk about that.
Well,
When was that?
After the Air Race Classic, after we flew that race, that condo had just been, complex had just been built, and so as part of the promotion, they offered people a place that would stay there. There's a reduced rent to stay there. So a lot of our CAP friends flew down from Illinois to meet us, there, and so we rented condos there. And then, of course, they were giving us a sales pitch and we fell for it. And so, so your dad and I bought a condo there. And that's the reason we bought it there was because.
Pensacola, not Panama
because
City.
Panama
Panama
City.
City, yeah.
Panama City.
Panama City?
It was really nice.
But you had a couple of them, didn't you?
We did.
After a while, but they were in the rental
Yes, because we
program.
bought them as investments and to rent out. And they weren't very good investments, but it was fun. We used them and.
I went there for my honeymoon,
So I,
I went crab fishing with Dad in the brackish water.
Yeah, that's what we
Right
had,
there.
those oysters and beer.
And I remember asking him, why do they turn red when you put them in the water? He says, well, wouldn't you if I poured you in boiling water? I went, yeah, well, okay. Makes sense.
Oh, that sounds right.
So what about Grafton and Dad's Grafton times? Now, when did that was in the 60s,
remember
right,
that
for the
house.
most part?
Grafton?
You remember that house he bought?
He loved duck hunting. And so that, he had friends that went down there and went duck hunting. And knew a bunch of commercial fishermen that lived down there.
Well, who were the friends that he first went down there?
Denny-
Was it Denny? Was Denny
Yeah,
Bang part of the
Denny
crew?
and Doc Bagby.
And Doug Bagby?
And then, of course, they met a bunch of people down there. And for a while, we owned a little.
That little house up
a
on
little house
stilts.
on
Yeah.
stilts on
It
the
was
river.
gray.
I remember
I
that.
remember
I do
that.
not remember
And
that.
fortunately, we sold it before the next flood, because Grafton got flooded out every so often, you know. But he would love to go down there, because there's good duck hunting down there, and they'd all have a good time.
Well, he took us down there and
Yeah,
then
all the time.
I remember going down there, yeah.
Cube and Cube's boys, and none of them had any teeth. And, but that's how they got that's how they got all their meat for the whole winter, was, they had these freezers just filled with ducks, and that's what they ate, but they didn't have.
Grafton's not changed a whole lot.
So when.
Well, they moved the whole town.
Yeah, they moved the town after the second flood.
Army Corps of Engineers
The
came in,
government
so we're
built
not
the
gonna build you
tax
again, and they moved the town up on a cliff.
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, we bought the
When you bought the farm.
Bought the farm in the 80s, because it was.
89.
Oh, it was 89.
86, I think.
89 according to the plaque.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
in the flag, so,
Well, he started going down there before he actually
Yeah.
bought it.
Before he bought
He was
it,
actually
He's
using
been
it
down there a lot of
before,
years.
before he actually bought it. Because when Ashley and I
He was in Bang.
went down with him before he had bought it, we were staying there what then became Turkey Run. It was all an open prairie and camp there.
Yeah, I got pictures of
I
that
think
camping.
Ashley was about 8.
Oh, it's fun.
I have pictures of you guys camping there. I have a lot of pictures of the farm. It's hard to sort them by year though. They're all kind of, I mean, you can sort of see it, but
It was a good idea.
I have a lot of pictures from the farm that are pretty cool that I'll post so everybody can look at them. So one of them was for you guys camping, and I wasn't sure when exactly that was with the tent.
Yeah, it was before, because he didn't want he didn't want us to talk to anybody, because he didn't want anybody to get a wind of the fact that he was interested in the property.
See, and I think some of us.
Courthouse steps, it was
Right.
Right, some of us had some different, heard different stories, I think, or different memories on how that whole thing went. Because I remember him telling me that he tried buying it from Larry Wooten, who wouldn't sell it to him and kept refusing. And he kept saying, but you're in bankruptcy. I can get you to save your credit. I can help you out of bankruptcy. And the guy wouldn't do it. And so they did foreclose on it. And the story I remember was that he wanted that property, but the bank owned it, was gonna put it up for auction. So he had gone and hung out in the various restaurants and Harbison's, which was Schaefer's then, and that restaurant in E-Town, and just told all the locals that he had bought it. And then when the auction time came, he was the only bid.
Really, I didn't know that.
That's what I remember him telling me, that he just went around and told everybody he bought it. So when the time
Wouldn't
came,
surprise
he was
me,
the
but I
only
had never
bid.
heard that.
But that's how I remembered it.
And then Jody and I were on a trip, and we were in Bangkok at that time, or
Yeah.
we were in Bangkok,
Mm-hmm.
other side of the world. We're in the back of a bus, get to talking to this one couple. Oh yeah, I'm from Illinois. Where are you from? Oh, little town, you wouldn't know it. I said, what town is that? She goes, Elizabethtown. and this is Kim.
Kim Rutherford.
Rutherford.
Yeah.
And her husband.
friends.
And, yeah, we're in Bangkok on the back of a bus, and she's telling me, and she's like, That's your dad? Because he hung around, so she worked in the courthouse for the recorder, I think, at that time.
She ran the abstract office,
abstract
which was
office.
in the courthouse until the courthouse, we got a new state's attorney and said, you can't have your office here, whatever.
And so he had been hanging, she knew him because he hung out down there, looking through all the records and then this whole thing about buying that piece of property.
And Sue McMasters was the county
Was the
clerk.
county clerk,
And
right.
Sue McMasters' son is our appliance repair guy. So Bill McMasters comes and he's fixing the washer one day, and he starts telling me, we get to talk, and it turns out, well, we finally make the connection of what my maiden name was. And he says, well, I know of your father. My mother and father still talk about him. To this day, his father's favorite word to say is Hruska. He just thought that was just the coolest name. And he was just there recently telling me this story, that his dad loves to say that name. And his dad still, his dad passed, or maybe he's, I don't know. But anyway, Sue was telling him about like when the school in Elizabethtown came up for sale, and he looked at it, but then he decided not to buy it, and another piece of property, and then it sold, and then he was upset that he didn't buy it. But then obviously it was good he didn't, but she tells a lot, she has some interesting stories about him coming down there, looking at properties and researching.
Well, he always wanted a piece of property surrounded on like 3 sides by national forest. I mean, that was like his criteria, and he looked in Michigan and Wisconsin, I think.
5 states or
Go
something.
Yeah. Well, and the loan was guaranteed by Farmers Home Loan Bank, so we actually ended up buying the farm from Farmers Home Loan Bank because the bank exercised a guarantee, and so I think he bought it actually from the Farmers Home Loan Bank.
But I think at that time also, the federal government had run out of money because the federal government was buying up properties because they were trying to get.
Trying to buy anything on the river,
anything
anything on Big Creek, basically, they were buying.
But they ran out of funding, and then that enabled him to be able to close on the deal.
Right.
Because otherwise, the government would have sucked it up, because they wanted to suck up all this land up down there that had been private. That's why you still have the patchwork of private parcels inside, essentially inside. It's not even
They'll do
3
land
sides, I mean,
swaps
it's basically
now.
in the middle of the forest.
You can do land swaps. It's the only way. They can't just, sell you a piece of it by law. So what they do is if you say, okay, I would like to buy this 20-acre portion that I own all the property around and I'd like to buy this. They'll send someone in, Mary goes in, she's the forest archaeologist, and she ascertains whether or not there's any historical significance there. And if she signs off and says there isn't, then they'll assess a value to it. And they'll say, okay, this is worth $50,000, whatever. So then they'll say, well, there's this piece of property over here that this guy's selling, and we as the National Forest really want this piece, but we can't just go buy it, the way the law is written or something. So they'll say, okay, you buy this piece of property worth $50,000, and then as soon as you own this, then we will swap with you. And that's what they do now to try and, bring that back together.
But you put your name in a queue, so it's got to come up. When they get something they want, then your name's up. What did you want again? Oh, okay, now we can do this.
Right.
So we're in the queue for a couple, aren't we?
We're in the queue, but
We're for the one house, they got 24 acres of Shawnee that's landlocked by everybody else, so it's not doing them any good. That's over by our Pine Ridge house. And then that 34 acres of Shawnee right across the street from us as well. That's all landlocked too. So those are 2 good parcels that they would be happy to get rid of so they can glom onto a bigger parcel.
But that farm, those people, they had 6 children, the Wootons, and they lived there into the late 60s, early 70s.
I heard 1952 was the last time anybody had it.
No,
I seem to have a lot of wrong information here.
No, I know they were
There's no
well
way
into
you
the
could live there in the
60s.
70s.
74.
No, because the woman, one of the daughters, one of the children has come back and has come to us and asked to go on the property. Well, it turns out her son owns the house next to Spencer's house, Mark Wooten. And that's his family, and he told me they were there into the 60s, that family still lived there.
I thought it was 74.
What's the story with the electricity? They thought it was a fad.
Well,
so
the
they never
people
got.
who owned the land originally when the co-op was started, and you can actually go into the co-op office and see a map that shows the electric lines that come down from E-Town to Bassett Road, and they stop at that last house. And then it comes, and that's one separate line, and there's a whole other separate line that comes in the other way down through, now Walnut Hill and that, and it ends there. And the reason is because the people who owned that farm at the time thought that the electricity was a fad. It was gonna go away, it wasn't gonna be,
Who needs that?
permanent thing. And so they didn't sign on to the co-op. Well, if you didn't sign up to be a member of the co-op, land was then dubbed a dead zone. And the only way that you can ever run power to it now is 100% from wherever the closest pole is. You have to pay for all the poles and all the power going to it. So there's two dead ends of electric that come down, and they stop at either side of the farm. And because that area is considered a dead zone. And it's actually marked and labeled on the maps at the co-op.
You mean the farm property is?
Yeah, yeah.
So if we want electricity there?
You would have to pay for it to come from our property, and you'd have to pay for every pole and line and everything bringing
Well,
it
that was
in.
all right with your father, because
'Cause he didn't want it.
electricity there anyway.
Right.
I'm just curious, how much would that cost? Not that we would ever do it, but how much would that?
Who
It's
knows?
about $300 a
Yeah.
pole, and poles that are like 125 yards apart max. Don't go any more than 125.
But that's just your poles and that's not really the running the lines.
So
and-
figure out how many yards you wanna run it, and then times that times 300 and whatever.
And then
That's just
add,
full, then you go.
That, well,
Well, you would never do anything with solar anyhow, so
You do solar panels and batteries.
that's what you do.
Mhm.
It's perfect just the way it is.
Remember the toilet seat?
Oh, that newfangled electricity.
He had a toilet seat up, and there were 3 trees when I first started going down there, and he had a toilet seat, and it was rigged up between these 3 trees, but nobody could get it but him because it was so tall.
Oh, I remember that.
So you
You
remember
basically needed a
that?
step stool to jump on the
To
thing.
jump on?
I remember when we burned the first outhouse, boy, that wood went up. That was like, I think we sent it like
Soap
signals to
retrieval.
space, basically, that fire burned so high. We like,
Well, then that sofa that we had in the downstairs
Yeah.
of the
Yes.
house, mom and dad's house, that sofa down there, we took down there, and of course the rats immediately got into it, mice and things. And we took that thing, and of course it was polyester, highly flammable, put it lengthwise on top. At that same time as that, we decided we'd burn all that garbage that was back behind the cabin. So we set that thing up there at the same time as the outhouse. And, those were.
so I want to ask you another couple questions. Do you, the Alabama farm is the Hans side, is that correct? From the Hans? So because there are quite a number of pictures of Grandma and Grandpa at the Alabama farm, Dad at the Alabama farm, and he talked about driving down there from Chicago at, on the side roads before they had interstates and all that.
That was a big impetus for him looking for this farm, because he had all
Right.
the great memories
Of
of
a
when
farm.
he was down there in Alabama.
And these
Okay,
are things
so-
that we really don't know. I don't know much of anything about the connection to Alabama. Where did it come from? How did it start?
So give us the data you got on that.
I'll tell you, so what happened was, they lived in Bohemia, and Grandma Hruska was a little girl, and the Germans came in, they were in the Sudetenland, and the Sudetenland was between Bohemia and the Germans were always coming across and taking it, and then they'd get driven out, and then it'd be Bohemia again, and so on. So the Germans came in, turn of the century, and they said that children could not go to Bohemian schools anymore, they had to go to German schools. And her father said, I'm not sending my daughter to a German school, she's going to Bohemian school. So he was a well-known woodworker, but he got blackballed because he wouldn't send her to
Oh,
a
that's
German
right.
school. So he couldn't get work anywhere. So he left and immigrated to the United States and promised to send for his family. And Grandma said, of course, they were getting a lot of smug looks from a lot of people because a lot of men said that, but they never sent for their family. But he was there. He went to Chicago. He was working as a woodworker. He used to make those those beautiful carved bars and with the back
Mhm.
bars and everything. And he did sing for them, and they came, and she was 8 years old. And so her father, you know, as a woodworker, made that. They lived in Iowa for a little while, not soon after she came, I don't know, I
Really?
never understood that.
But they were in the tenement houses in New York at some point.
No, not New York, because they came through Nova
Where
Scotia.
then? Because she used to talk about flicking the bed bugs off every morning
No,
was
that
her
would have been in
job.
Chicago, that
In
would not,
Chicago.
that would not.
Okay, so let's back up again. So her father came first.
He
The
came
great-grandpa
first,
came
and he
first.
sent the money for his wife, and by that time there were three, I think there were 3 children. She was the oldest, and then she had, I think, 2 brothers. And so Grandma Hans and her children came in steerage from Europe. It was a terrible thing. They were all sick the whole way because they were down in the bottom of the boat, you know. And then
Cheap tickets.
and they got on,
Mhm.
they landed in Nova Scotia, and then they got on a train and took the train from Nova Scotia to Chicago. And she always tells a story about, you know, that the train would stop and there'd be vendors, you know, selling things. And there were vendors selling bananas, and the kids wanted a banana. They'd never seen a banana before. They didn't know what it was, but they liked the look of it, and they begged her, so she finally bought them with bananas. Well, they didn't know you were supposed to peel them. So they didn't like them because it didn't taste very good. You eat the peels. But at any rate, they got there and they did live there. And then eventually, her father, this was after she was grown up and not, you know, dependent on me anymore. Then her father always wanted a farm. So he bought this farm in Alabama. And it was a pecan farm. And it was
Oh, really?
full of pecan trees, yeah. And so in the summers, Grandma and Grandpa would pack the kids up, and they'd get on the train, and they would go all the way down to Alabama. This was their vacation, their 2-week vacation. And they would have their vacation there. So, and they'd go, you know, fishing and
Dad with his cousin.
And you're right, and so, and then the thing that always then embarrassed them, because Grandma would send them home with a big box of fried chicken on the train, and of course they were embarrassed because they were eating fried chicken on the train, you know, like a bunch of immigrants, which is exactly what they were. But that was very fun, because it was the only vacation they had, you know.
So that would have been in the, probably what, the 50s for him? 40s, early, late 40s?
In the 40s, I would say.
Probably late.
Right,
Yeah,
40s.
it'd be in the 40s, I would say.
And,
Because he was a kid.
But now, how about when you moved down there?
What?
Or how about when you moved there, or was it Alabama or Florida?
Yeah, we went down
He
there.
quit Prudential and took a job.
Yeah,
What?
His father is.
see, I don't know anything.
I didn't know that.
What?
So, listen,
He got involved with this guy who had, I forget what it was he was selling, and so the father decided to go with him. And I remember my parents crying because we had you as a baby, and we were going to move to Alabama, and we went down there, and
When was this?
Oh, this was in 1957.
this is before you, so I was one or 2.5 years old. I was like 1 year
No, you
old.
were a baby.
Yeah, right.
It's still,
Not
you
even.
know,
Pre-me?
couldn't walk yet, just a few months old. And of course, then we went with these people up to Springfield, Missouri, and stayed there a while. And then we realized this was foolish, so we got his old job back in Champaign, and we moved back there. And so-
Was this before Healy
Just a few
Street?
months. That was just a few months.
Before Healy Street, or?
Oh, it was before, yeah. And we were just married and had a baby, and it was.
When did you buy the Healy Street property? Was that when you were still in college? No, after college. So it was after college, before
Lived in
Healy.
Champaign for 5 years after college, and at first we lived, while he finished school, we lived in an apartment over the garage of some friends of Denny Bing's, I think, or something like that. And then we moved to that duplex over in Champaign, and that's where you were born. And, and then we bought the house on Healy Street while you were a baby. And then David was coming along, and it was only a 2-bedroom house, there was no room.
Oh, it was small. You can see it on the internet now. It's
Yeah.
very
And it
interesting to
looks
go
just
look
like
at.
it
It looks
looks
exactly the same.
And so we
Google.
decided we
Street
would sell that house and we would build a new house. So we got the contract and we were gonna build this house. And then I was pregnant, and I found I was pregnant with twins. And we put this house up for market, and we thought, well, we'll sell it about the time that the house is built. Well, it sold within 2 weeks, and we had just a few days to find some place to live. And so we rented a house out in, kind of in suburbs. And there we were, all of our belongings were packed in boxes in the garage. I was pregnant with twins. There were 3 little boys. And we were trying to start Chuck in kindergarten over in the neighborhood where we thought we were moving any minute. And of course, that meant he had to be transferred over there. It was a nightmare. And it was the same time as the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh.
So we're watching on TV, trying to decide whether we should pack everybody up and go down to Tamaro where there was a bomb shelter.
Oh
Because
my
it looked like there was
God.
going to be a nuclear war, you know.
Realistically, that was a fear. I mean, that was like, when that was happening, that was real.
But then all the neighbors would have been standing in the garage waiting to go down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Every tornado, they'd all be in the garage waiting for
Yeah.
us to open up.
Because Grandpa had a bomb shelter built, right?
He had the bomb.
It was an old cistern.
No.
Yeah.
And
But it
during
was
this-
metal. I mean, it was like.
Yeah, it was,
Oh, yeah, concrete showed me how he made it. He was
Yeah.
proud of it.
So then, didn't he get transferred to Chicago, like right when you moved in or something?
Just before I found out that I was pregnant, I was elected president of the Champaign Women's Club, so I had this responsibility. And then I had these 3 children. I was pregnant with twins. We had to sell our house and build a new one. And the house wasn't getting done, and the twins were due at around Christmas, and we finally said to the builder, we're moving into that house whether you've got it done or not, so you better work really fast because we're coming. And we moved in right before, the twins were born on Christmas Eve, and we moved into the house the next week. And 2 weeks later, Prudential said that they were promoting him to an agency manager and we had to move to the Chicago area. And we had a mother's helper who needed help herself. She was a wild teenager, which her father was trying to keep under control, because I couldn't keep anybody under control except trying to keep these babies taken care of. It was just a nightmare, and then he went off. And there I was, 5 children under what, say 7, I guess,
Would have
something
been
like
under,
that, or
well,
5,
six.
less than
5
that.
or 6.
Because I was 6, I was
You were in kindergarten,
between
so.
5 and 6 years old when we
Yes,
moved to
right.
Flossmoor.
And
So
so-
then
How did you pick the
that's not
Flossmoor
quite-
house?
And so then he kept looking for houses while he was up there, so he finds houses that he thinks maybe it's gonna work. So we all pile in the car to go up there and look at this house.
Oh
We
my
go to
God.
stay at the Holiday Inn, and we have twins that are like 3 months old, and 3 little boys, and we go into the dining room in this hotel.
Anarchy.
It's one night, and everybody in the place looks at us as we sit there. And I said, I'm never going into this restaurant again, and we have to have room service. I'm so embarrassed because we just created such a sensation. And we tried to buy this house, and we looked at several, but this one, we made an offer on it, and they turned it down, and they didn't like it. And so we waited a while, and we made another offer for a little bit more, and they turned that down. And then finally, we made an offer, we bought for $35,000, and I thought, this is way over our heads, we are never gonna be able to pay for this house, I don't know, this is the most foolish thing we ever did, but we bought it. But of course, we had no furniture. We had kids, but no furniture. So, I think almost the first year, we didn't have furniture in the living room. We had beds in a lot of bedrooms.
With no headboards, and then even in that picture that
Yep.
group picture, the first one, there's a little
TV
plastic
tray.
and metal.
TV table, TV
TV
table,
stand,
it's a bedside table.
TV,
Yeah.
TV tray.
It was.
With the coffee pot on it. And no, and Grandma Glenn, no, she thought maybe you had too many babies.
Oh, gosh.
So wasn't she
Yeah.
angry?
And she said, and there are no twins on our side of the family.
Oh, that's what she.
That's what she said. She just was furious about it. She said, no twins. I said, Mom, these are fraternal twins. They can't come from the father because there are two eggs. It doesn't have anything to do with the father. Well, there are no twins in our family.
Somehow you can picture her saying that too. Well, I'm not changing my story.
Then I said, okay, which one would you give back? And she said, well, of course, none of them out there here.
Oh, didn't Grandpa then say at some point, maybe after Susan came along, well, just keep her hands off and just tell him, Dad, just keep your hands off her.
I thought you said she
Well-
pulled Dad aside or something.
Well,
No,
no, she
I
attacked
don't
him.
remember that. That could
So-
have happened, but I don't.
No, Grandpa, yeah,
They
we
wouldn't
were
have said
told
it
the
in
story
front
that when she found out that Mom was pregnant with Susan, then she attacked Mom, and she was only about the size of half a minute. And Dad,
Who
of
attacked
course,
Mom?
that Grandma attacked Dad. You attacked my dad.
Well, attack is probably a strong
About
word.
I never heard that story.
getting her pregnant again and da-da-da-da-da, all that.
Well, I do remember the trips from Flossmoor over to South Holland when we would go over there for dinner and
Get service
Get
chicken.
service
Or 5
chicken.
o'clock mass.
and have, Grandma had the line of Cokes.
Oh, yeah.
Cokes and 7-Up, I mean, literally, we never had any of that stuff, because whenever she went to the grocery store, it was basically rated like a pack of wild animals, and it was gone within hours. So, but
And
they
all
had
down the stairs to the
and-
basement, too.
endless rows of Cokes and 7-Ups, and
We were allowed to have it.
we were allowed to have it, and they had those green glasses, and they had the great ice cubes in the refrigerator. So you put the ice in there, and then you pour the Coke over the top, and it was just like perfect. And they had the service chicken. I mean, that was really good. And they'd watch All in the Family.
Yeah, always.
And 60 Minutes.
And the Jeffersons.
Sullivan, probably.
Then she taught us how to play pinochle, because
Oh, yeah.
she didn't have anybody to play pinochle
Yeah.
with. So
You know, man,
she taught all of us grandkids how to play pinochle. So she had people to play pinochle.
Yeah, and all the men cheat, looking at their glasses.
And
that
all
how
of
they
one
just-
another, right?
look at
Oh,
their
no, that's all
reflections in
sorts
their
of
glasses.
No, it'd be like
How many fingers they'd hold
No,
up?
it'd be like this. This is, no, you can't hold my cards this way. No. And they all hollered. I said, well, why didn't you play them? He says, oh, well, it's okay.
And nobody else.
Everybody else would play, but so they'd all.
And Thelma and her
Yeah.
husband would come up and
Yeah.
they would
They always did that.
When was the decision made?
And you would always say, I'm trying to catch myself cheating. If I do, I'm gonna
Agency?
make myself.
Oh, that's a good question.
What was
I
that?
remember the day.
Karen said, when was the decision made to start the agency?
Well, this is kind of interesting in that your father was managing the Prudential agency in Evergreen Park. And of course there were always sales goals and this sort of thing. And they had set some enormous goals or something. And some sales manager, as a means, this is so bad, as a means of encouraging him to sell more, sent a needle in an envelope, something with some kind of a note, and the idea was we're needling you to do better. He was so offended by it. He just could not believe that they would treat him like that. I mean, that was like he was just floored by it. And that really, he was finished with, emotionally, he was finished with Prudential after that, because he felt like they weren't treating him like an adult, and they were using cheesy kind of tricks and that sort of thing. And so he started interviewing other insurance companies who were eager to have him represent them, and so he quit and started his own agency at that point. But it was a sales tactic by the managers in Chicago. that did.
And that was life insurance only. So he had his own brokers and
Life and
that,
health.
Columbus Mutual, a little bit
Life
of
and
health, and Columbus Mutual.
And then when did you get involved? Because at that point.
When I went to
That
school.
was, that's,
When that-
he got
that-
involved when they did the Shrewd
Aetna,
Air Force
when they-
Base
they
thing
had
I was
this-
talking about.
Aetna had come out with this thing called group auto and group homeowners, and so he sold this credit union in Champaign, Manitoula on this, and so he said, I sold this and I'm not gonna be able to handle it, you're gonna have to come in and handle it. So of course, what did I do? I did it, and I went and got my license really quickly, and so then I took care of all the property and casualty insurance, because he didn't want to sell property and casualty, he wanted to sell life insurance.
Yeah. And then that's when that contract ended, you were doing both, and then so you were selling some things locally, and then that contract ended, but they gave you the other contract, and then he did that Continental
But we
thing.
were selling, but at that time, we were selling some auto and
Right.
other things, and so
And
we
Fox.
built, and then, so then I built that up, because he didn't really want anything to do with it.
And so I know that the office was always downtown Plattsburgh, but was it always from the very beginning?
Well, no, it was in Evergreen
just
Park.
It was in Evergreen Park,
It
just
was
down the
in
street from where the
Evergreen.
Prudential
Okay.
office was.
Oh, right there.
And,
How many years was that?
when did it start, Chuck? You're the one with the.
Well,
historical-
so he was 10 years with Prudential.
Yes, long enough he stayed long enough
Enough to
to
get a
vest
pension.
his pension.
Right. And then he opened up down the block on 95th and Avers, which is where the office was. Because I used to drive up there when I was 16 years old to do payroll. Because he decided I need something else to keep me for a job. And then that was until, well, I don't know, so it was I was in high school.
Two or
I
three
was in high
years, I
school.
think, we were up there,
Yeah,
maybe,
I was
maybe
in high
as
school
long
when
as
you
5
started,
years.
when you moved the agency to Flossmoor Road.
Yeah, Flossmoor Road was the
Right.
first one in Flossmoor.
And I was in high school during those times, so that would have been 1971, 1972, something
Right.
like that. So I think maybe it was 72. For some reason, I was thinking, okay, 62 up to, we moved to Flossmoor in 62. And then in like 72, 73, something like that, then you guys put the office there. Well, wait, hold on, no.
The Brown Building?
I was driving to Evergreen Park when I was 16. So that means I would have been, what, a sophomore in high school?
Junior.
Or junior.
Sophomore and junior, all right, so it was on into, so it was even a little bit later, maybe it was towards the very end of my, so you were, because you were still in Evergreen Park.
Probably was, because I do
You were still
remember
in
it.
Evergreen Park when I was of driving age, because I drove up there to do that. And Marilyn worked for them then, and they taught me how to do payroll. I had to go up there a couple times a month. So that was when I was 16, so I was driving. And so it had to be sometime after that, because then when I was done with college in 79, worked for VIX for the rest of 79 into the fall of 1980, and that's,
Which was not a good idea.
no. So how long did he have the bar in
Oh,
Cicero?
just 2 or 3 years, that was when we were in college.
Right, and then Grandma said, this is done, this is
And
over.
Grandma thought he was drinking too much, so she put an end to that.
Now, if you guys have listened, if you haven't listened to the naturalization talk that she gave at Grant School, it's really worth listening
Yeah,
to.
listen to that, that's fascinating.
Because it's really fun to hear her voice too, hear both their voices actually. And she goes through all that history of how long, because he went out to California and he got into the linen business
He
again.
got into the linen business kid, so they soon made him a supervisor.
Yeah.
And of course, all the workers there were Mexican workers, And I remember that he, the only Spanish he knew was underlay. It means work faster, work faster.
I think he used to say that to us.
And so he would used to come home and he'd say that to everybody in the family, underlay.
Underlay from this family, bump them in the bazaats, my children know that one.
Yeah.
And you gotta eat a bushel of dirt before you die.
No, I listened to that one, it's fascinating listening to her
Yeah,
voice.
yeah, her
And
voice.
because she would like clear her throat, you know what I mean, how she would do that?
Right,
She'd clear her throat.
Right.
And it's like, it's just weird.
yeah. It is, you really get, you completely go back there, I mean, it's, the voice is so
Grandma
distinct.
Hruska was the most, she had the bohemian quality that she watched every penny.
Mm.
And I'll never forget the first time we went up there to visit, and I opened up her pantry, and there was not a thing in that pantry that didn't have a red sales sticker on it. She never paid full price for anything. And she was very careful.
Yeah, well, on that video that you posted, she was saying how, like, when they came to Chicago, how they were called greenhorns, you know, and that was just what they were called because they were new to the country. And I guess your grandpa, Hruska, you know, he had been in the country longer. Like, he wasn't like first generation, he was born in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So, like,
He was.
he didn't know that grandma was not born in the United States. And at some point he found that out and he said, I didn't know I married a greenhorn. You know, he might not have married you if he had known she was a greenhorn, which was kind of fun to, you know, hear that little story about her.
She had to study for her citizenship.
For her citizenship, yes.
And then she tried to get a driver's license. And she failed her driver's test twice. And then she didn't ever.
You know which one it is? You know? Oh, that's how that's.
The farm is the farm still in the family down there, the Hans family?
I doubt it, but I don't.
Because Uncle Joe, I remember they used to talk about Uncle Joe. He used to talk about Uncle Joe, he said.
But Uncle Joe didn't own that farm.
No, but Uncle Joe worked always worried he was gonna run out of money, and so, till the day he died, he was sweeping out bars at the end of the
Yes,
night.
he
And
was a
then
typical
when he ended
worker.
up dying, he ended up having more money than anybody else in town.
Well, these are the case.
There you go. So don't be your Uncle Joe.
Well, Grandma and Grandpa went to Alabama to visit one of their, you know, people of their same
Right,
age.
it was like a cousin.
Yeah. Because there was a number of pictures of them down there just yucking it up with some people that are basically their age.
Yeah, it was a cousin then.
Yeah, so it must have been in the family at some level,
Oh, it
or,
was, because I went there
yeah.
when we were first married.
Because I was having a hard time placing that. I knew it was Alabama, but I was like, okay, who are these?
Near Mobile.
Who are the Schroeders?
And the Schroeders
That's
were.
his-
Are they on your side of the family?
That's his cousin,
No,
so.
that's your,
So my Aunt Rose, Grandpa's sister, was also called Rose, I think it was.
Grandpa's?
She was in the wheelchair all those years. And she married Bernie Schroeder.
Schroeder, but her name wasn't Rose.
It wasn't Rose? No, it was,
I'm trying to remember what it was.
but she was in a wheelchair, I remember.
Which side of the family? I mean, like who's?
Grandpa
We were talking about
Hruska, Grandpa
Grandpa
Hruska.
Hruska's
Oh, Bernie
sister?
Schroeder was, his wife was Millie?
Millie, yes, that's right.
Because
So,
she was very, he was very tight. Bernie was like his older brother type of thing.
Bernie was your dad's cousin. He was the first one in the family to go to college.
Right.
Was Dad's cousin?
Godfather, so what?
That's just a nice way to pull that out of here.
And they lived in Cicero, and then they moved out to the west suburbs. Bernie died a few years ago.
There's some things have to find it, right?
Get a mind like a sieve.
And then-
So that was a
Well,
that was a pretty good session.
Yeah, it was a good session. It was a very good session. We got a lot down there.
We'll have the test later.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll be back here tomorrow at noon and pick
Right,
up where we
Jody?
left off.
She's running.
Jody's coming last.
Right, tomorrow at noon.
All right, well, that was a good session. Everybody say goodbye.